When the monster learns to bleed. They found the body at dawn, except it wasn't supposed to be a body yet. The poison should have taken weeks. Someone interfered. Someone saw too much. And in a city ruled by fear that someone just signed their own death warrant. This is the story of a king who never learned to kneel, a ghost who refused to disappear, and the night everything burned. Before we begin, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. Because what you're about to hear, it doesn't stay buried for long. The rain didn't fall on Ashcroft City. It attacked. Sheets of black water hammered the marble towers downtown, turned the neon signs into bleeding colors, and made the streets slick enough that even the rats moved carefully. Cale Veer stepped out of the armored Escalade and felt the cold slap him across the face like an insult he couldn't punish. His security detail formed a wall around him, umbrellas raised, earpieces crackling with static and paranoia. "Clear, sir." Cale didn't answer. He never answered the obvious. Ravenmere House rose ahead of him like a monument to quiet suffering. 8 stories of cream stone and tinted glass, gardens manicured to perfection, fountains that ran even in winter. It called itself a private wellness estate, which was rich person language for a place where the dying came to die slowly and expensively. Kyle paid for the top floor, the best doctors, the softest sheets, everything money could buy, everything except honesty. He walked through the lobby without acknowledging the staff. They scattered like birds. The receptionist's smile died halfway up her face. The security guard pretended to study his clipboard. Fear had a smell in places like this, antiseptic with an edge of sweat underneath. Cale took the private elevator to the 4th floor. His reflection stared back at him from the polished brass doors. Sharp suit, sharper jaw, eyes like frozen seawater. 43 years old, and he looked like he'd been carved out of something that didn't bleed. People called him a businessman. The newspapers called him a philanthropist when he donated to their parent companies. The streets called him what he actually was. The doors opened. Room 417 sat at the end of the hallway, past the nurse's station where 2 women in pastel scrubs suddenly found urgent paperwork to shuffle through. Kale's footsteps echoed on the tile, slow, deliberate, the kind of rhythm that made people remember they had somewhere else to be. He stopped at the door, took a breath he didn't want to need, pushed it open. The room smelled like lilies and lies. His mother sat in the chair by the window, wrapped in a cashmere blanket that cost more than most people's cars. Evelyn Vire, 71 years old, silver hair pulled back in a bun that had gotten looser over the months, hands that trembled even when she tried to hold them still. She'd been dying for 6 months. The doctors called it aggressive decline, natural causes, the cruel mathematics of age. Cale called it unacceptable. "You're late," Evelyn said without looking at him. Her voice came out thin, like paper tearing. "Traffic." "Liar." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. She was the only person left who could call him that and live to see morning. He crossed the room and sat in the chair across from her. Outside, the rain hammered against the window hard enough to make the glass shiver. The city sprawled below them, thousands of lights, millions of people, an empire built on concrete and compromise. His empire. "How are you feeling?" Kyle asked. "Like I'm dying." She finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were still sharp, still the same green that his never inherited, but slower than they want. The words landed wrong. Too specific, too calm. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn's hands tightened on the blanket. For a moment she looked away, back toward the window, and Kyle felt something cold crawl up his spine. He'd seen his mother angry, grief-stricken, proud, furious, but never afraid. Not until now. "There's a girl," Evelyn said quietly. "Works in the cafeteria. Name's Celine." Cale waited. He'd learned a long time ago that silence made people finish their thoughts faster than questions. "She saved my life." The rain got louder, or maybe that was just the blood in Kyle's ears. "Explain." Evelyn's breath came shallow. 3 weeks ago, my medication changed. I didn't notice at first, thought it was just a new prescription, but I started feeling worse. Dizzy, couldn't think straight. The doctor said it was normal progression. It wasn't. No. She looked at him now, and the fear in her eyes made something inside Kyle's chest tighten like a fist. Celine noticed. She works nights sometimes, delivers meals, cleans rooms. She saw them changing my charts after midnight, saw men I'd never met signing orders with doctors' names. Cale's jaw set hard enough to crack teeth. Who? I don't know their names, but Celine does. Evelyn pointed toward the hallway with a shaking finger. She's out there now. The girl with dark hair, carrying the tea service. Cale stood and moved to the door in 3 strides. Through the narrow window, he could see down the corridor. Nurses chatting, an orderly pushing a wheelchair, and a young woman in a plain gray uniform balancing a tray of cups. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, thin shoulders, face he wouldn't have looked at twice. She was nobody, which meant she'd seen everything. She switched the medications, Evelyn continued behind him. Threw out the poisoned ones. Started watching my room at night on her own time. No one asked her to. No one paid her. She just... Her voice cracked. She just did it. Cale's hand curled into a fist against the doorframe. His mind was already moving through the architecture of Betrayal, who had access, who had motive, who stood to gain from his mother's death. The list was longer than he wanted to admit. When? His voice came out flat, controlled. The tone that made boardrooms go silent. Last week. 2 men came to my room at 2 a.m. I was barely conscious. They'd given me something earlier that made everything fuzzy. But I remember their voices, cold, professional. They were talking about dosages, about timelines. Evelyn's breathing got faster. Then Celine walked in with a cleaning cart. She saw them. They saw her. And? She pulled the fire alarm. Cale turned slowly. She what? Pulled the fire alarm. The whole building evacuated. Security came running. The men disappeared. Evelyn's hands were shaking badly now. She saved my life, Cale, and now she's going to die for it. The words hung in the air like smoke. Cale looked back through the window. The girl, Celine, was gone. The hallway stood empty except for the fluorescent lights and the quiet hum of machines keeping people alive. Stay here, he said. Where are you going? To fix this. Cale, but he was already gone. Dead. The cafeteria sat in the basement level, past the physical therapy rooms, and through a hallway that smelled like institutional cooking and floor wax. Cale took the stairs instead of the elevator. His security detail followed 2 steps behind, hands hovering near concealed weapons, eyes scanning every corner. They didn't understand what they were looking for. Neither did Cale. He'd built an empire on knowing who mattered. Politicians, judges, competitors, people with power, leverage, connections. People who could hurt him or help him. Everyone else was scenery, background noise in a world that only paid attention to the ones who could afford a seat at the table. Now his mother was telling him that the person who'd saved her life was someone he'd never bothered to see. The cognitive dissonance made his head hurt. The cafeteria doors were propped open. Inside, the space stretched wide and sterile. Rows of empty tables, a serving line shut down for the night, industrial dishwashers rumbling in the back. 2 workers were wiping down counters. Neither of them was her. Can I help you, Mr. Vire? The manager appeared from nowhere, sweating through his polo shirt. Cale didn't know his name and didn't care. I'm looking for someone. Celine Vale. The manager's face went carefully blank. She's not scheduled tonight. I didn't ask when she was scheduled. I asked where she is. I'm not sure, sir. She might have gone home already. Cale stepped closer, didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. Find her. The manager fumbled for his phone with shaking hands, made a call, listened, hung up. She's in the supply room, east wing, 1st floor. Cale walked out without thanking him. The supply room door was unmarked and halfway down a corridor that barely qualified as maintained. Flickering overhead light, scuffed linoleum, the kind of space where the important people never went. Cale opened the door. She was sitting on an overturned crate surrounded by boxes of cleaning supplies, eating something out of a plastic container that looked 3 days past its expiration date. Her uniform was wrinkled. Dark circles carved shadows under her eyes. She looked up when he entered and froze with a plastic fork halfway to her mouth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she set the container down carefully, stood up, didn't smile. You're Evelyn's son, not Mr. Vire, not sir. Just a statement of fact delivered in a voice that sounded like gravel and exhaustion. Kael, he said, I know who you are. She crossed her arms. Up close she looked younger than he'd thought, mid-20s maybe, with the kind of worn-down edges that came from too many double shifts and not enough sleep. Your mother tell you? Some of it. Then you know why I can't talk to you here. Celine glanced past him toward the door. They're watching. They've been watching since it happened. Who? I don't know their names, but I've seen their faces. She pulled her phone from her pocket, an old model with a cracked screen, and showed him a photo. 2 men in dark suits standing near the nurse's station, clean-shaven, professional, forgettable except for the way they weren't looking at anything in particular, the way predators watched a room. Kael memorized the faces in 2 seconds, committed them to the part of his brain where grudges lived forever. I need you to come with me, he said. Celine laughed, short, sharp, humorless. Yeah, that's not suspicious at all. The most dangerous man in Ashcroft City walks into the basement and tells the cafeteria worker to follow him. I'm sure that ends great for me. You think staying here ends better? That shut her up. Kael took a step forward, kept his voice low. My mother says you saved her life. If that's true, then you're the only person in this building I can trust, which means you're also the only person who can help me find out who's trying to kill her. And if I don't want to help, then you're dead by morning. The words came out colder than he meant them. Celine's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away, didn't flinch, just stared at him with the kind of exhausted defiance that came from having nothing left to lose. Your mother's a good person, Celine said finally. She doesn't deserve what they're doing to her. No, she doesn't. But you? Celine tilted her head. Jury's still out. Kael almost smiled. Almost. Fair enough. If I do this, I want something in writing. Protection. New identity. Enough money to disappear. Done. Just like that? Just like that. Celine studied him for another long moment. Then she grabbed a worn jacket from the back of a chair and shrugged it on. You try anything, I'll scream loud enough to wake the dead. Noted. And I'm keeping this. She pulled a small canister from her pocket. Pepper spray, drugstore brand. Kael gestured toward the door. After you. They took the service elevator to the parking garage. Kael's security detail formed a perimeter around them, earpieces live, hands ready. Celine stood in the center of it all, looking like she'd stumbled into someone else's nightmare. The Escalade waited with its engine running. Kael opened the door himself, a gesture that made his head of security twitch with disapproval. And Celine climbed in like she was stepping into a tiger cage. They pulled out into the rain. Ashcroft City slid past the tinted windows in streaks of neon and sodium light. The financial district gave way to the warehouse quarter, then the commercial sprawl, then finally the south side where the buildings got shorter and the streets got meaner. Celine watched it all without speaking. Where are we going? She asked finally. Somewhere we can talk without being interrupted. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting right now. She turned to look at him. Your mother said you were difficult. She's being generous. She also said you care. Under all the... Celine waved a hand vaguely at him. Whatever this is. This? The whole terrifying crime lord thing you've got going on. Kael's eyebrow went up. Crime lord? I read the papers. I know what you are. And you still pulled that fire alarm? Celine looked back out the window. Your mother remembers my birthday. She asks about my brother. She's the only person in that entire building who treats me like I'm human. Her voice went quiet. So yeah, I pulled the alarm. The Escalade turned down a private road that led to a glass tower overlooking the river. Kael's building. 47 floors of steel and money, and the kind of view that made people forget what the ground looked like. They rode the elevator to the penthouse in silence. Whoa! The office took up the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides. Minimalist furniture that cost more than cars. A desk made from a single slab of black marble. The rain hammered against the glass like it wanted inside. Kael gestured to one of the chairs. Sit. Celine sat, looked around, didn't touch anything. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter. The expensive kind that people bought to impress other people. Handed her one. She took it, but didn't drink. Start from the beginning, Kael said. Tell me everything. So she did. It started 3 weeks ago. Celine had been working a double shift. Someone called in sick. Management didn't want to pay overtime, so they guilt-tripped her into covering. She'd been delivering the late dinner service when she noticed something wrong with Evelyn's chart. The medication dosages were different. Not by much, just enough that you'd miss it if you weren't looking. But Celine had seen the chart 2 days earlier when she'd cleaned the room, and the numbers had changed. She asked one of the nurses about it. The nurse told her to mind her own business. That should have been the end of it. Celine knew how the world worked. People who asked questions got fired, blacklisted, worse. She'd grown up in the South Side where curiosity could get you buried in a foundation somewhere. She understood the value of keeping your head down and your mouth shut. But Evelyn had been kind to her, and kindness was rare enough that Celine couldn't ignore it, so she started paying attention. Medication charts that got rewritten after midnight. Security cameras that mysteriously malfunctioned during shift changes. Doctors signing orders they'd never written. It was small stuff, the kind of thing you could explain away if you wanted to. Except it all centered around room 417. Celine started volunteering for the overnight shifts. Told management she needed the extra money, which was true, but not the reason. She wanted to see who was coming and going when the rest of the facility slept. That's when she saw them. 2 men in expensive suits. They'd show up around 2 a.m., flash credentials at the night security guard, and head straight to the 4th floor. They never stayed long, 20 minutes, maybe 30. But every time they left, Evelyn got worse. Celine tried reporting it. She went to her supervisor, got told to stop making trouble. She went to the facility director, got called into an office where a man with dead eyes and a $1,000 tie explained very carefully that Ravenmere House had excellent lawyers and she had student debt she'd never pay off if she couldn't work. The message was clear, so Celine stopped reporting and started acting. She began switching Evelyn's medications herself. Nothing dramatic, just swapping the pills in the little plastic cups before they got delivered. Throwing out the ones that looked wrong. It was risky as hell and probably illegal, but Evelyn started improving, which made the men come back more often. 1 week ago, everything escalated. Celine was cleaning rooms on the 4th floor around 2 a.m. when she heard voices coming from 417. Male voices. Calm. Professional. The kind of tone people used when they were discussing the weather or quarterly earnings, except they were talking about dosages, about accelerating timelines, about making sure the son inherited while he was still fractured by grief. Celine's blood went ice cold. She should have run, should have pretended she didn't hear anything, but Evelyn was in that room, alone, vulnerable, and these men were talking about killing her like it was a business transaction. So Celine walked in, just pushed open the door with her cleaning cart and acted like she belonged there. The 2 men turned to look at her. One of them smiled, the kind of smile that made Celine's skin crawl. The other one's hand moved toward his jacket. That's when she pulled the fire alarm. Red lights flooded the corridor. The alarm was loud enough to wake the dead and bring the living running. Security came pouring out of the elevators. Staff started evacuating residents. The 2 men disappeared into the chaos like smoke. Celine spent the next hour being questioned by security, then management, then someone who claimed to be from the city fire marshal's office but had the wrong kind of eyes. They let her go with a warning, but she knew. They'd be back. Kael listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he set his untouched whiskey down on the desk and stood at the window, looking out at the city he'd spent 20 years conquering. "You have the photos?" he asked. Celine pulled out her phone, showed him a gallery of images, medication charts, time-stamped security footage she'd somehow captured, photos of the 2 men, records of late-night entries, prescriptions signed with forged credentials. It was sloppy work, amateur, the kind of evidence that wouldn't hold up in court, but Kael didn't need a court. "Send those to this number." He handed her a card. "All of them." She hesitated. "What are you going to do?" "Find out who wants my mother dead." "And then?" Kael turned to look at her. His face was calm, almost peaceful, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Make sure they regret it." Celine's hands were shaking as she transferred the files. When she finished, she stood up. "I should go. You're staying here. Excuse me? Those men know you saw them. They know you interfered, and they know you're a loose end. Cale walked back to the desk, pressed a button. Marcus will set you up in one of the guest suites. Don't leave this building. Don't contact anyone. Don't tell me what to do. Celine's voice came out harder than she probably meant it. I helped you because your mother's a good person. That doesn't mean I'm yours. No, Cale agreed. It means you're under my protection, which is the only reason you'll still be breathing tomorrow. The door opened. Marcus appeared, 6'4", 250 pounds of muscle and silence. Celine looked at him, then back at Cale. I have a brother, she said. He's 16, lives in the South Side. If anything happens to me, give Marcus the address. He'll be here within the hour. Just like that? Just like that? Celine stared at him for a long moment. Then she rattled off an address in a neighborhood Cale wouldn't have visited without an armored escort. Marcus nodded and left without a word. Why are you doing this? Celine asked. Cale considered the question, considered lying, decided against it. Because my mother was right. I thought money could protect people for me. I was wrong. And now? Now I'm fixing it. Celine walked toward the door, then stopped, looked back. Your mother said you used to be different, before everything, before... She gestured at the office. This. People change. Do they? Celine's eyes were too sharp, too knowing. Or do they just forget who they were? She left before he could answer. Cale spent the next 4 hours alone in his office, tearing apart his empire piece by piece. He pulled financial records going back 5 years, cross-referenced names, dates, payments, called in favors from accountants who owed him, hackers who feared him, lawyers who knew better than to ask questions. The pattern emerged slowly, money flowing through shell companies, payments to Ravenmere House staff, bonuses for specific doctors and nurses that had no legitimate justification, and at the center of it all, buried under layers of corporate paperwork and careful misdirection, was a name that made Cale's blood turn to ice. Lucien Drac. His right hand, his closest advisor, the man he'd trusted for 12 years to manage the parts of the empire Cale didn't want to think about, the man he'd called brother. Cale picked up his phone, dialed a number he hadn't used in years. It's me, he said when the line connected. I need surveillance on Lucien Drax, everything. Where he goes, who he sees, every phone call, every transaction, and I need it yesterday. The voice on the other end asked no questions. Cale hung up and stared out at the rain-soaked city. Somewhere out there, Lucien was making plans, building alliances, positioning pieces on a board Cale had been too blind to notice. The revelation should have made him angry. Instead, he felt something colder. Clarity. Dawn broke gray and ugly over Ashcroft City. Cale hadn't slept. Didn't need to. Sleep was a luxury for people who weren't hunting traitors. Marcus appeared at 6 a.m. with coffee and a folder. The boy's secure, he said. Gave him a room on the 32nd floor. Didn't ask questions. Good. Also, we found something. Marcus opened the folder. Inside were photos of Lucien meeting with 3 men in a parking garage, time-stamped 2 nights ago. These are the same men from the Ravenmere security footage. Cale studied the images. Lucien looked relaxed, confident. The other men looked like hired professionals, interchangeable, disposable, expensive. Where is he now? His apartment in the financial district. We've had eyes on him since 3 a.m. He hasn't moved. Cale stood. Let's fix that. They hit Lucien's building at 6:47 a.m., when the city was still half asleep and the doorman was too focused on his coffee to care who walked past the desk. Cale took the private elevator straight to the penthouse level with Marcus and 2 others flanking him. The door wasn't locked. That was the first sign. The second was the empty apartment. Lucien's place looked like a showroom. Expensive furniture, expensive art, expensive everything. But no personal items, no clothes in the closet, no toiletries in the bathroom, just the carefully curated illusion of a life that had already packed up and left. He's gone, Marcus said. Cale walked to the window, looked down at the city waking up below. No, he's making a move. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. Hello, Kyle. Lucien's voice came through smooth and calm, like they were old friends catching up. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. Where's my mother? Safe. For now. We moved her to a different facility early this morning. Better security, better doctors. She'll be very comfortable while we finish our business. Kael's grip on the phone tightened hard enough to crack the screen. If you hurt her... You'll what? Kill me? Please. We both know you need me alive to find out where she is. Lucien laughed softly. This was always the problem with you, brother. You thought fear made you untouchable. But everyone has a weakness. Yours just happens to be blood. What do you want? What I've always wanted. Your empire, your connections, your seat at the table. Lucien's voice hardened. You've had it all for 20 years. And what did you do with it? Built towers, hoarded power, made everyone afraid to breathe wrong around you, but you never built anything real, never earned anyone's loyalty, just bought their fear and called it respect. Is that what this is? A jealousy play? No, this is a hostile takeover. Lucien paused. I'll make you a deal. Sign over controlling interest in your holdings, all of them, and I'll tell you where your mother is. She lives. You live. You just live smaller. And the girl? Celine Vale? Lucien sounded amused. She's a loose end. You know how I handle loose ends. The line went dead. Kael stood there for a moment, phone pressed to his ear, listening to silence. Then he turned to Marcus. Find him, Kael said quietly. Tear this city apart if you have to. Find him. Find my mother. And bring them both to me. And the girl? Kael thought about Celine sitting in that supply room eating expired food, risking her life for someone who couldn't pay her back. Thought about his mother saying she'd been saved by someone he'd never bothered to see. Keep her safe, he said, whatever it takes. Marcus nodded and left. Kael walked to the window and looked out at Ashcroft City, his city, built on fear and money and the kind of power that made people forget what loyalty actually meant. Somewhere out there, Lucien was moving pieces into place, and somewhere else, his mother was running out of time. For the first time in 20 years, Kael Veer realized something that made his stomach turn. He'd built an empire, but he'd never bothered to see who was standing underneath it, holding the foundation together while he took all the credit. The cafeteria workers, the security guards, the invisible people who kept the machine running while men like him pretended they'd done it alone. And now one of those invisible people was the only reason his mother was still alive. The irony tasted like ashes. When Kael got back to his building, Celine was in the kitchen of her guest suite making coffee like she owned the place. Her brother, a skinny kid with too long hair and suspicious eyes, sat at the counter eating cereal straight from the box. Nice digs, the kid said. This how the other half lives? Dante, shut up, Celine muttered. Kael ignored them both and went straight to his office. Pulled up the surveillance reports Marcus had sent. Started building a map of Lucien's known associates, properties, shell companies, places he might take someone he wanted hidden. An hour passed. Then 2. His phone rang. Private number again. We found something, Marcus said. Lucien owns a facility outside the city. Old industrial zone. Records say it's a storage warehouse, but the power consumption's way too high for that. Send me the location. Already done. But Kael, there's something else. What? The facility's registered under a subsidiary. Guess who else is on the board? Kael's jaw clenched. Tell me. Dr. Harrison, Evelyn's primary physician at Ravenmere. The pieces clicked into place like a gun being loaded. I'm going, Kael said. That's a mistake. You should let us... I'm going, Marcus. Have the team ready in 20 minutes. He hung up. Behind him, the door opened. Celine stood there holding her coffee mug, looking at him with those exhausted, too knowing eyes. They took her, didn't they? She said. Not a question. Yes. And you're going after her? Yes. Celine set the coffee down. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. She's my friend. She's my mother. And I'm the one who pulled that fire alarm, Celine's voice cracked. I'm the reason they moved up their timeline. I'm the reason she's in danger now instead of dying slow like they planned. So don't tell me I can't come. Kael studied her. saw the fear underneath the defiance, the guilt, the same thing he'd been feeling since this whole nightmare started. "You'll do exactly what I say," he said finally. "Fine. And if things go wrong, you run." "Sure." "Celine." "I heard you." She met his eyes. "But if you think I'm going to watch from the car while you storm in there alone, you don't know me at all." Kale almost smiled. Almost. "Get your coat," he said. They left 20 minutes later, 4 vehicles, 12 men, enough weapons to start a small war. The rain had stopped, but the sky stayed bruised and angry, clouds hanging low like a threat. Celine sat in the back of the lead vehicle next to Kael, her hands clenched in her lap. She hadn't said a word since they got in. "You can still back out," Kael said. "Can I?" "No, but I thought I'd offer." That got a small, sharp laugh out of her. "Your mother was right about you." "What'd she say?" "That you're difficult, dangerous, and totally incapable of asking for help." Celine looked at him. "But that, somewhere under all that, you're still the kid who used to bring her flowers every Sunday." Kael's throat tightened. He looked away. "That was a long time ago." "Not that long." The warehouse sat 40 minutes outside the city, past the industrial parks and into the dead zone where companies went to disappear. It was a massive concrete structure surrounded by chain-link fence and security cameras that probably worked better than they looked. The convoy stopped half a mile out. Marcus appeared at Kael's window. "Thermal imaging shows at least 8 people inside, 2 guarding the main entrance. The rest are deeper in the building." "Any sign of my mother?" "Can't tell. Too much interference." Kael nodded. "We go in quiet. No shooting unless we have to." "And if we have to? Then make it loud enough that Lucien knows I'm here." Marcus grinned. It wasn't a nice expression. They moved in teams, 3 groups of 4 approaching from different angles. Kael went with the lead team. Celine stuck to him like a shadow despite his repeated attempts to tell her to wait outside. The main entrance was locked but not alarmed. Marcus picked it in under 30 seconds. They slipped inside to darkness and the smell of rust and old machinery. Kael's eyes adjusted slowly. The warehouse stretched vast and empty, broken only by support columns, and the occasional stack of crates that looked like they hadn't been moved in years. But there was light ahead, a soft glow coming from deeper in the building. They moved toward it. The corridor opened into what looked like it used to be an office complex. Walls had been torn down, spaces reconfigured, and in the center of it all was a room with glass walls and medical equipment inside. Evelyn Vire lay on a hospital bed, connected to IV lines and monitors. Kael's vision went red. He started forward, but Marcus grabbed his arm. "Wait, it's too easy." "I don't care." Then the lights came on, all of them, bright enough to blind. Kael threw up his arm and heard movement around them. Footsteps, weapons being cocked, the rustle of tactical gear. When his vision cleared, they were surrounded. 15 men in black tactical gear formed a semicircle, rifles raised. And standing in front of his mother's room, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, was Lucien Drax. He was smiling. "Hello, brother," Lucien said. "Right on time." The fluorescent lights burned into Kael's retinas like acid. He could feel Celine pressed against his back, her breathing shallow and fast. Marcus had already moved to shield them both, one hand hovering near his concealed weapon. The tactical team spread in a loose perimeter around them didn't move, just 15 barrels pointed at center mass, waiting for an excuse. Lucien stood in front of the glass room like a curator showing off his favorite piece. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind that whispered money without screaming it. Behind him, through the transparent walls, Evelyn Vire lay motionless except for the steady rise and fall of her chest. "You can put the guns down," Lucien said, not to Kael but to Marcus. "We're all professionals here." "Are we?" Kael's voice came out flat, cold, the tone that usually made boardrooms empty. "Because this looks like a hostage situation to me." "Hostage is such an ugly word." Lucien walked forward slowly, hands visible, unthreatening. "I prefer leverage, more businesslike. You understand business, don't you, Kael?" "I understand betrayal." That got a smile, sharp and brief like a knife flash. "Do you?" Because I spent 12 years standing next to you, watching you build an empire on other people's fear, and you never once asked yourself what I wanted, what I needed. Lucien stopped 10 feet away, close enough to see the whites of his eyes, far enough to stay outside grabbing distance. You just assumed loyalty was something you bought, like everything else. Cale felt Celine shift behind him. Her hand gripped the back of his jacket. Whether to steady herself or hold him back, he couldn't tell. "Let her go," Cale said. "This is between us." "Oh, I don't think so." Lucien glanced past him at Celine. "Miss Vale, the hero of our story. The cafeteria worker who thought she could save the world with a fire alarm." His smile widened. "How's that working out for you?" "Go to hell," Celine said. Lucien laughed. Actually, laughed. "I like her. She's got more spine than half the men in this room." He turned back to Cale. "You know what's funny? I had everything planned perfectly. Slow decline. Natural causes. You'd inherit while you were still grieving, make mistakes, and I'd be right there to catch the pieces when you fell. Clean, efficient, profitable." Then she pulled that alarm, Lucien agreed. "And suddenly I had a cafeteria worker asking questions, switching medications, watching my people like she had any right to interfere. Do you know how close she came to ruining everything?" Cale felt the muscles in his jaw lock. "Close enough. Not quite. But it did force me to accelerate the timeline." Lucien gestured to the glass room. "Hence our current arrangement. Your mother's comfortable, I promise. Better care than Ravenmere ever provided. I'm not a monster, Cale. I'm just a better businessman than you." "You tried to murder my mother." "I tried to remove an obstacle. There's a difference." Lucien's expression hardened. "Your mother is the only person on this planet who makes you vulnerable. As long as she's alive, you'll always have that weakness. And weak men don't hold empires, they lose them." Marcus moved. Not much, just a fractional shift of weight that said he was ready to move fast and violent. The tactical team responded instantly, rifles tracking him like magnets finding north. "Easy," Lucien said softly. "Nobody needs to die today. This is a negotiation, not an execution." "Doesn't feel like a negotiation," Marcus growled. "That's because you're holding a losing hand and you know it." Lucien pulled a folded document from his jacket. "Here's how this works. You sign over controlling interest in your holdings, all of them, to a shell company I've prepared. In exchange, your mother walks out of here alive. You walk out alive. Miss Vale walks out alive. Everyone goes home. Except I lose everything. You lose the empire. You keep your life. Most people would call that a win." Cale stared at the document like it was a coiled snake. His mind was already racing through options, calculating angles, looking for the leverage point that would flip this entire situation. But every scenario ended the same way. Lucien held his mother, and that meant Lucien held all the cards. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Cale asked. "You don't. But you know what happens if you refuse." Lucien's eyes went cold. "I turn off the machines. Your mother dies. Then I kill the girl for good measure. Then I hunt down every single person you care about until there's nothing left but you and the ruins of everything you tried to build." Celine made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "You're insane." "No, I'm practical." Lucien looked at her. "You should have stayed in your cafeteria, Miss Vale. Kept your head down. Minded your business. Instead, you decided to be a hero. And now you get to watch what happens when heroes interfere in things they don't understand." "I understand plenty," Celine shot back. "I understand you're a coward who poisons old women because you're too weak to fight fair." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Lucien's smile vanished. He took a step towards Celine and Cale moved without thinking, putting himself between them, one hand coming up in a warning that needed no words. "Touch her," Cale said quietly, "and I'll kill you with my bare hands." "Will you?" Lucien stopped, tilted his head. "Even if it means your mother dies?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Cale's hands were shaking. He couldn't remember the last time his hands had shaken. Anger, he understood. Violence, he could control. But this paralysis between impossible choices, was something he'd built his entire life to avoid. "Give me the document," he said. "Cale, no," Marcus started. "Give me the goddamn document." Lucien held it out. Kale took it with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. The legalese blurred together, but the meaning was clear. Sign here and lose everything. Refuse and watch everyone he'd failed to protect die in front of him. He looked at his mother through the glass walls. She was awake now, eyes open, watching. Even from here, he could see the fear in her face, the helplessness, the same helplessness he felt right now. "There's a pen in the folder," Lucien said helpfully. Kale found it. Cheap ballpoint, the kind you'd get at a bank. Somehow, that made it worse. He moved toward the document. Then Celine grabbed his wrist. "Don't," she said. Not loud, not dramatic, just a single word that carried the weight of everything she'd risked to get here. Kale looked at her, really looked. She was terrified. He could see it in the way her pupils had dilated, the way her breathing came too fast. But she wasn't backing down, wasn't looking away. "He's going to kill us anyway," Celine whispered. "You know that, right? The second you sign, we're liabilities." "She's smarter than she looks," Lucien observed. "So what do you suggest?" Kyle asked Celine, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Fight 15 armed men with, what, pepper spray and attitude?" "I suggest we call his bluff." "This isn't a bluff." "Isn't it?" Celine's eyes darted to the glass room. "If he wanted your mother dead, she'd already be dead. He needs her alive to control you, which means he needs you functional, which means a gunshot cracked through the warehouse. Everyone moved at once." Marcus drew his weapon. The tactical team's rifles swung toward him. Kyle threw himself in front of Celine and felt something hot slice across his shoulder. Not a bullet, just a ricochet fragment, but it burned like a brand. Then the lights went out. Complete darkness. Absolute. The kind that made you forget which way was up. Kale heard shouting, running footsteps, someone screaming orders. A second gunshot, louder this time, close enough that the muzzle flash lit up the warehouse for half a heartbeat. He grabbed Celine's arm and pulled her down behind a stack of crates. His shoulder was bleeding. He could feel it soaking through his shirt. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the chaos erupting around them and the fact that someone had just started a firefight in a room with his mother. "Stay down," he hissed at Celine. "What's happening?" "I don't know." Which was true. Kyle had expected Lucien to try something, an ambush, a double cross, something, but not this. Not a complete breakdown of the situation into violence and confusion. Emergency lighting kicked on. Red bulbs embedded in the ceiling cast everything in bloody shadows. Kale risked looking over the crates and saw the tactical team in disarray, some taking cover, some advancing, all of them trying to figure out who was shooting and why. Then he saw Marcus. His head of security was moving through the warehouse like a predator, fast and efficient, taking down tactical operators with precise shots that dropped them before they could return fire. 3 men down already. 4. And behind Marcus came more of Kyle's people, the ones who'd been waiting outside, who'd apparently decided that waiting was done. Lucien saw it too. His face went from smug to furious in the space between heartbeats. "Kill them!" he screamed. "Kill them all!" The warehouse exploded into a war zone. Gunfire strobed in the darkness. Bullets sparked off concrete and metal. Someone threw a flashbang that turned the world white and silent for 5 endless seconds. Kale felt Celine clutching his arm hard enough to bruise. He could hear her breathing, fast, panicked, the sound of someone who'd never been shot at before and was rapidly learning what that felt like. "We need to move," he said. "Where?" Good question. The main exit was a kill zone. The glass room where his mother was trapped sat right in the middle of the crossfire. And somewhere in this chaos, Lucien was probably trying to either escape or finish what he'd started. Kale made a decision. "Can you run?" "What?" "Can you run?" Celine nodded. Her face had gone sheet white, but her eyes were focused. "Stay behind me," Kale said. "If anything happens, you keep going. Get to the glass room. Get my mother out." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Kale broke from cover and ran. The distance from the crates to the glass room was maybe 40 feet. It felt like 40 miles. He could hear bullets cutting the air around him, could feel the heat of muzzle flashes, could smell cordite and blood and fear. Celine stayed on his heels. They made it halfway before someone stepped into their path. One of Lucien's tactical operators, big guy. Body armor, rifle, coming up. Kale didn't slow down. He crashed into the man like a freight train, using momentum and rage to drive them both into the concrete floor. The rifle clattered away. The operator tried to bring up his sidearm, but Kyle got there first, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it wrong, felt something pop. The operator screamed. Kale hit him in the throat hard enough to collapse his windpipe. Silence. He stood up shaking. His hands were covered in blood, some of it his from the shoulder wound, some of it the operator's, all of it warm and sticky and wrong. Celine stared at him with wide eyes. "Move," Kyle said. They ran. The glass room's door was locked but not reinforced. Kale put his shoulder into it, the good shoulder, and it gave way with a crack of cheap wood. Inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and fear. Evelyn was conscious, sitting up, tearing the IV lines out of her arm with shaking hands. "Mom, I heard the shooting." Her voice was stronger than it had any right to be. "Is this you fixing things?" "Working on it." Kyle moved to her side, checking her over with the kind of desperate efficiency that came from having no medical training but a lot of experience with injuries. "Can you walk?" "I can try." "Good enough." He turned to Celine. "Help her up." Celine grabbed Evelyn's other arm, and together they got the old woman to her feet. She swayed, almost went down, but Celine held her steady with the kind of strength that came from somewhere deeper than muscle. Outside the glass room, the firefight continued. Kyle could hear Marcus shouting orders, could hear the tactical team falling back, could hear something that sounded like sirens in the distance. Cops or reinforcements. Either way, they were out of time. "There's a back exit," Evelyn said suddenly. "East side, I saw them bring supplies through it." "You sure?" "I've been here 3 days. I paid attention." Kale almost smiled. Almost. "Lead the way." They moved as a unit, Kale in front, Celine and Evelyn in the middle, staying low and quiet. The east side of the warehouse was darker, less developed. Storage areas and empty offices and corridors that went nowhere useful. But there was a door, heavy steel, emergency exit. Alarmed, but Kyle didn't care anymore. Alarms were the least of their problems. He hit the crash bar and the door flew open to cold night air and the smell of rain on concrete. Outside sat an industrial lot, weeds growing through cracks, abandoned trucks slowly rusting. And beyond that, the lights of Ashcroft City glowing against the low clouds. Freedom. They made it 10 steps before Lucian found them. He came from the shadows near the fence line, gun raised, face twisted into something ugly and desperate. His perfect suit was torn. Blood ran from a cut above his eye. He looked like everything he'd planned had just collapsed, and he'd decided to take everyone else down with him. "Stop," he said. Kale stopped, put himself between Lucien and the others. "It's over," Kale said. "Let us go." "Over?" Lucian laughed, high and sharp and broken. "It's not over until I say it's over. I spent 12 years building this, 12 years waiting for my chance. You think I'm just going to let you walk away? You don't have a choice. I have this." Lucian raised the gun, pointed it at Evelyn. "I have her, same as before, same as always. You want her alive, you sign the papers. The papers are inside. Then we go get them." Kale felt the world narrow down to the space between heartbeats. He could rush Lucian, probably close the distance before the trigger got pulled. Probably. But probably wasn't good enough when his mother's life was the cost of being wrong. "You were my brother," Kyle said quietly. "I was your employee. There's a difference." Lucian's hand was shaking. The gun wavered. "You never saw it. Never saw me. I was just another piece of furniture in your empire. Useful. Disposable. Forgotten the second I left the room." "That's not true, isn't it?" Lucian took a step closer. "When's my birthday, Kyle? What's my favorite drink? Do I have family? Friends? Anything that matters?" Another step. "You don't know. Because you never cared. You just expected loyalty like it was something you were owed. So this is about being noticed. This is about taking what should have been mine from the beginning." Lucian's voice cracked. "I'm smarter than you. Better connected. I built half your empire while you took all the credit. And when I finally had the chance to step out of your shadow, you didn't even notice until it was too late." Behind Kyle, Celine made a soft sound. He didn't turn to look, but he could feel her there, exhausted, terrified, still standing. You want recognition? Kyle asked. Fine, you're smart, you're capable. You deserve better than I gave you. Don't patronize me. I'm not. I'm agreeing with you. Kale spread his hands. But murdering my mother won't fix anything. It'll just make you the same as me, someone who uses fear instead of earning respect. Maybe I'm okay with that. Are you? The question hung there. Lucien's finger was on the trigger. Kale could see the pressure building, could see the moment forming where everything would either break or hold. Then Celine stepped forward. Don't, Kyle said. She ignored him, walked right past him until she was standing between Lucien's gun and Evelyn. Her hands were up, empty, trembling. Shoot me instead, she said. Celine, Evelyn started. Shut up! Celine kept her eyes on Lucien. You want to hurt him? Fine. I'm the one who ruined your plan. I'm the one who pulled that alarm. I'm the reason you're standing here with nothing. She took another step. So shoot me. Lucien stared at her. You're insane. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of watching powerful men hurt people because they're too weak to ask for what they need. You don't know anything about me. I know you're scared. Celine's voice went softer. I know you spent your whole life in someone else's shadow, and it made you angry, made you bitter, made you think that taking what you wanted was the same as earning it. Another step. She was close now, close enough to touch the gun. But it's not, and deep down, you know it. Stop moving. Make me. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then Lucien's hand started to lower, slowly, like he was fighting every instinct he had. I could have been great, he said quietly. If he'd just given me a chance. You still can be. Celine reached out, touched the gun barrel, pushed it down gently. But not like this. The gun fell. Lucien stood there empty-handed, and something in his face just broke, like a dam finally giving way to pressure it was never meant to hold. He dropped to his knees and made a sound that wasn't quite crying, but wasn't anything else either. Kale moved fast, grabbed the gun, kicked it away. Behind them, Marcus appeared with 3 others, weapons drawn. We clear? We're clear. Kale looked down at Lucien. Get him out of here. Somewhere quiet. No cops yet. What are you going to do with him? Good question. Kale thought about the last 12 years. Thought about trust and betrayal and all the ways he'd failed to see what was happening right in front of him. Thought about Celine standing in front of a gun because she understood something about courage that he'd forgotten. I don't know yet, he said finally, but not this. Not execution. Marcus nodded and hauled Lucien to his feet. The man didn't resist, didn't speak, just let himself be led away like a puppet with cut strings. Celine turned to Kael. Her face was pale. Sweat soaked through her shirt. She looked like she was about to collapse. That, she said, was the stupidest thing I've ever done. Probably saved his life. Maybe. She looked at Evelyn. You okay? Better than I have any right to be. Evelyn reached out and took Celine's hand. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet. We're not out of here. She was right. Kale could hear sirens getting closer, could see lights in the distance, probably police, possibly media, definitely complications he didn't need. We need to move, he said. They made it back to the vehicles. Kale's convoy was shot to hell, bullet holes in the doors, windows blown out, one of the engines smoking. But they were running. He put Evelyn and Celine in the least damaged SUV with Marcus driving, took the passenger seat himself. His shoulder was still bleeding, but that could wait. Where to? Marcus asked. Kale thought about Ravenmere House. Compromised, corrupted, dangerous. Thought about his penthouse. Too visible, too vulnerable. Thought about all the places he'd built his empire and realized none of them felt safe anymore. The old house, he said finally. North End, past the suburbs. Marcus raised an eyebrow. The place hasn't been used in years. I know. It's not secure. I know that too. Just drive. They drove. The city fell away behind them, towers and lights, and the architecture of power. Kale watched it disappear in the rearview mirror and felt something he hadn't felt in 2 decades. Relief. In the back seat, Evelyn had fallen asleep against Celine's shoulder. Celine herself looked half dead from exhaustion, but her eyes were still open, still watching. You should rest, Kyle said. So should you. I will, eventually. Liar. He almost smiled. They drove for another 40 minutes, past the suburbs and into the rural sprawl where Ashcroft City's grip started to loosen. The house sat on 5 acres of overgrown land, a 2-story colonial that Kyle's father had built and his mother had loved, and Kyle himself had abandoned the second he'd made enough money to afford something that didn't smell like memories. It looked smaller than he remembered. Marcus pulled up to the front door, killed the engine, sat in silence. You sure about this? He asked. No. Good enough. They got Evelyn inside and settled on the couch in the living room. Someone had kept the electricity running, probably a service Kyle had forgotten he was paying for. The furniture was covered in dust sheets, but underneath everything was exactly how he remembered. Family photos on the mantel, his father's reading chair, the kitchen table where his mother had taught him to do homework while she cooked dinner. A whole life he'd left behind to build an empire. Selena wandered through the rooms like a ghost, touching things carefully. This is where you grew up? Long time ago. It's nice, feels real. It's old. Same thing sometimes. She turned to look at him. What happens now? Kyle leaned against the doorframe. His shoulder hurt. His head hurt. Everything hurt. I don't know. You're a terrible liar. Everyone keeps saying that, because it's true. Celine walked over to him, stood close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the fear she was trying to hide. Lucien's not going to just disappear. He's got connections, resources, people who still think he's the better choice. I know. So what's the plan? Fix what I broke. That's not a plan. That's a bumper sticker. Kale laughed. Actually laughed. It came out rough and surprised him. You're right. I usually am. Celine crossed her arms. For what it's worth, what you did back there, putting yourself between him and your mother, that was brave, stupid, but brave. Runs in the family, apparently. Maybe. She looked toward the living room where Evelyn was sleeping. She's stronger than she looks. Both of you are. Not strong enough. Strong enough to still be breathing. That counts. The house creaked around them, old wood settling, wind pushing against windows, the sounds of a place that had weathered storms before and would weather them again. Kyle's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then he did. It's Marcus, came the voice. We've got a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where Lucien had a backup plan. Marcus sounded grim. He made calls while we had him, reached out to his contacts. By morning, half the city's going to know what happened tonight. And they're going to come for you, for your mother, for everyone connected to this. Pause. You've got maybe 12 hours before this turns into a war you can't win. Kyle closed his eyes. How many people are we talking about? Enough. That's not a number. It's the only number that matters. Marcus took a breath. Boss, you need to make a choice. Either we disappear right now, leave the city, let Lucien have what's left of the Empire and hope he's satisfied, or we end this. Tonight. Before it gets worse. How? We find everyone who helped him, everyone who knew, everyone who looked the other way. Marcus's voice went cold. And we make sure they understand what happens when they cross you. Kale looked at Celine. She was watching him with those 2 knowing eyes. What would you do? He asked her. Me? She laughed, bitter. I'm a cafeteria worker who pulled a fire alarm. I'm not qualified to answer that question. You stood in front of a gun, twice. You're more qualified than you think. Celine was quiet for a moment, then, I'd ask myself what kind of person I want to be when this is over. Because the choices you make tonight, they're going to define who you are tomorrow. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Kyle turned away, looked out the window at the dark fields beyond. Somewhere in the distance, Ashcroft City glowed against the clouds like a fire that never went out. His city, his empire, his prison. Marcus, he said into the phone, round up everyone you trust. I mean really trust. Not the ones who work for money, the ones who'd bleed for you. How many? All of them. What are we doing? Cale took a breath, made the choice. We're going back. We're finding everyone Lucien corrupted, every doctor, every nurse, every administrator who took his money and looked the other way while he tried to murder my mother. His voice went quiet, deadly. And we're burning it all down. Even if it means war? Especially if it means war. Marcus was silent for a beat, then, I'll make the calls. The line went dead. Cale stood there holding his phone, feeling the weight of what he'd just committed to. Behind him, Celine hadn't moved. You're really going to do it, she said. Not a question. Yes. Even though it might destroy everything you've built? Everything I built was already broken. I just didn't want to see it. Celine walked over to the window, stood beside him. Your mother's not going to like this. My mother doesn't get a vote. Everyone gets a vote. That's the point. She looked at him. You're not the same person who walked into Ravenmere 3 days ago. No, I'm not. Is that good or bad? Cale thought about it. Thought about the empire he'd built on fear. Thought about Lucien on his knees. Thought about Celine standing in front of a gun because someone had to. I don't know yet, he said finally. Ask me when this is over. If we survive that long. If we survive that long. They stood there in silence, watching the darkness beyond the windows. Somewhere out there, Marcus was making calls. Lucien was making plans. The city was sleeping, unaware that by dawn everything would change. And in the living room, Evelyn Vire slept on, guarded by strangers who'd become family and a son who'd finally learned the difference between power and protection. The clock on the mantel showed 3:47 a.m. In 6 hours, the sun would rise on Ashcroft City. In 6 hours, Cale Vire would either reclaim his empire or watch it burn. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure which outcome scared him more. Because the truth was finally clear, sharp as broken glass. He'd spent 20 years building a kingdom where loyalty was bought, fear was currency, and trust was a weakness to exploit. And it had taken a cafeteria worker with pepper spray and too much courage to show him what that kingdom had actually cost. Now the bill was coming due, and Cale Vire had finally run out of ways to avoid paying it. Dawn came like a wound opening across the sky, red and raw and violent. Cale stood at the window of the old house, watching the horizon bleed into morning, while behind him Marcus coordinated movements on 3 different phones at once. The living room had transformed into a war room, maps spread across the coffee table, photographs pinned to the walls, names circled in red marker. Everyone who'd helped Lucien, everyone who'd looked away, everyone who was about to learn what happened when you tried to kill Evelyn Vire. Celine had fallen asleep in the armchair around 4 a.m., her head tilted at an angle that was going to give her a hell of a neck-ache. Evelyn sat awake on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like mothballs and old memories, watching Cale with eyes that had seen too much and understood even more. You're making a mistake, she said quietly. Cale didn't turn around. You don't know what I'm planning. I know my son. I know that look. Evelyn's voice was stronger than it had been in months. You're about to do something you can't take back. They tried to kill you. So now you're going to kill them? I'm going to make sure they can't try again. There's a difference between protection and revenge, Cale. He turned then, looked at his mother sitting there fragile and fierce and alive against all odds. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, they look pretty similar. That's because you're not looking close enough. Evelyn set her tea down with hands that barely shook. Revenge is what you do when you're angry. Protection is what you do when you love something more than you hate what hurt it. The words landed harder than Cale wanted to admit. Marcus appeared in the doorway. We're ready. 23 men, all verified, all willing to move on your word. Targets? 17 primary, 8 secondary, every doctor, administrator, and security officer at Ravenmere who took Lucien's money, plus his known associates in the financial district. Marcus pulled out a tablet, started scrolling through faces. We hit them simultaneously. Fast. Clean. Send a message that lasts. Cale studied the photographs, recognized some of the faces, people he'd seen in passing, people who'd smiled at him while poisoning his mother. The rage that had been simmering in his chest since this whole nightmare started flared hot and bright. "Do it," he said. "Kyle," Evelyn started. "This isn't up for debate, Mom. Everything's up for debate. That's how we stay human." She stood up, swaying slightly, and Celine jerked awake in the chair, looking around with wild eyes before realizing where she was. Evelyn crossed to Kyle and put her hand on his arm. "I'm alive. We're safe. Let that be enough." "It's not enough." "Then what is?" Kyle pulled away from her touch. "Justice. Justice or vengeance. What's the difference anymore?" Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned to Marcus. "How many people are going to die if he does this?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I can't give you an exact number. Estimate. Depends on resistance. Could be 0, could be more." "Could be more," Evelyn repeated. "And you're okay with that?" "I'm okay with protecting my boss." "Your boss is standing right here asking you to stop." She looked at Kyle. "I'm asking you to stop." The room went silent except for the old house settling around them and the distant sound of birds waking up to a world that didn't know it was about to catch fire. Kale felt something crack inside his chest, not breaking, just fracturing enough to let doubt seep through. Then his phone rang. Unknown number again. He answered without speaking. Kyle Vire. A voice he didn't recognize. Male, calm. The kind of calm that came from being absolutely certain you held all the cards. "My name is Victor Chen. I work for Lucien Drax. Or I did, until about an hour ago when I realized he was going to lose. Get to the point. The point is I have information you need. About who else was involved. About how deep this goes." Victor paused. "And about what Lucien was really planning." "I already know what he was planning." "Do you? Because from what I'm hearing, you think this was about money and power. A hostile takeover. Standard corporate warfare." Victor laughed softly. "It was never about that." Kale's grip on the phone tightened. "Then what was it about?" "Meet me and I'll tell you. Alone. No weapons. No backup." "You're insane if you think I'm walking into a trap." "It's not a trap. It's an offer." Victor rattled off an address. 1 hour. Come alone or don't come at all. Your choice. The line went dead. Kyle stood there staring at his phone, feeling the weight of another impossible decision settling across his shoulders. Marcus was already shaking his head. "Don't. Whatever you're thinking, don't. He said he has information." "He's lying." "Probably. But what if he's not?" "Then it's still a trap." Marcus moved closer, voice dropping low. "Boss, you go alone. You're giving them exactly what they want. A clean shot. No witnesses. Or I get answers. Or you get buried." Celine had stood up from the chair. She looked exhausted and wired at the same time, running on fumes and adrenaline. "What if I go with you?" "Absolutely not," Kyle and Marcus said simultaneously. "I'm just saying, he said alone. He didn't say unarmed civilian couldn't be nearby watching from a car." "That's still backup," Marcus pointed out. "That's observation." Celine crossed her arms. "Look, you're about to make a choice that affects everyone in this room. Maybe you should have all the information before you burn the city down." She was right, and Kale hated that she was right. 1 hour, he said to Marcus. "Get everyone in position, but tell them to wait for my signal. Nothing moves until I give the word. And if you don't give the word, then you make your own call." Marcus didn't like it. That much was written all over his face, but he nodded, started making calls. Kale turned to find his mother staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Be careful," was all she said. "Always am." "Liar." He almost smiled. "Aseg." The address led to an abandoned office building in the warehouse district, 20 stories of broken windows and graffiti sitting on the edge of the river like a tombstone for dead ambitions. Kyle parked the SUV 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance with Celine trailing behind at what she insisted was a totally normal, not following you distance. The front entrance had been chained shut years ago, but someone had cut through the lock recently. Fresh marks on the metal. Kale pushed through and stepped into a lobby that smelled like mold and rain damage. "9th floor," Victor's voice echoed from somewhere above, speakers hidden in the walls. Elevator's broken. You'll have to take the stairs. Kale looked up at the rotting ceiling and started climbing. The stairwell was a nightmare of peeling paint and missing railings. Water dripped from pipes that had burst winters ago. Every footstep echoed like a gunshot. By the time Kyle reached the 9th floor, his shoulder was screaming from the earlier wound and sweat soaked through his shirt. The door opened onto a floor that had once been cubicles and conference rooms. Now it was just empty space and pigeons. At the far end, silhouetted against the massive windows overlooking the river, stood a man in an expensive suit, Victor Chen. He was younger than Kyle expected, mid-30s maybe, with sharp features and sharper eyes, the kind of person who'd learned early that intelligence was its own kind of weapon. "You came," Victor said. "I'm impressed. You said you had information." "I do." Victor gestured to a folder sitting on what used to be a receptionist's desk. "Everything you want to know about Lucien's plan. Names, dates, financial trails, enough evidence to bury everyone involved." Kale didn't move toward the folder. "What's the catch?" "The catch is that you're not going to like what you find." Victor walked over to the windows. "Tell me something. When did you first suspect Lucien was moving against you?" 3 days ago. "Wrong. He's been moving against you for 8 years, since the day his sister died." The words hit like a physical blow. Kale went very still. "What did you say?" "His sister. Elena Drax." Victor turned to face him. "You don't remember her, do you?" "No reason you should. She was just another name in a file. Another casualty of business." "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you?" Victor pulled out his phone, swiped through photos, held one up. "Elena Drax, 26 years old, worked as a paralegal for Morrison and Associates. They were auditing one of your shell companies. She found discrepancies. Started asking questions." Kael's mouth went dry. "I've never heard that name." "That's because you had her silenced before she could testify." Victor's voice stayed calm, but his eyes were ice. "Car accident, brake failure. Very convenient timing. The investigation went nowhere. Morrison and Associates dropped the audit. Everyone moved on." "That's not... I never ordered, You didn't have to. That's the genius of it." Victor pocketed his phone. "You built a machine so efficient at protecting your interests that people like Lucien could make those calls on your behalf. Eliminate threats, clean up problems. All while you sat in your tower pretending your hands were clean." The room tilted. Kyle grabbed the edge of the desk to steady himself. His mind was racing through 8 years of memory, trying to find the moment, the decision, the order that had led to... "She was his only family," Victor continued. "Parents dead. No other siblings. Just Elena and Lucien against the world. And then you took her away." "I didn't." "You did. Maybe not directly. Maybe not consciously. But the empire you built, the machine you created, it killed her just as surely as if you'd cut the brake lines yourself." Victor walked closer. "Lucien spent 8 years getting close to you, earning your trust, becoming indispensable, all so he could be in position to take everything when the moment was right. By killing my mother. By making you feel what he felt. Loss. Helplessness. Watching someone you love die while you're powerless to stop it." Victor stopped 5 feet away. "The poisoning was never meant to succeed. It was meant to hurt. To make you suffer the way he suffered." Kale's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the desk edge, feeling like the floor had just opened beneath him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Lucien's in custody. Your people have him. And in about..." Victor checked his watch. 6 minutes. He's going to tell you the same thing I just did. He's going to look you in the eye and explain exactly how you murdered his sister, how you destroyed his life, how everything he did was justice, not vengeance. And then what? And then you have to decide who the monster really is." Victor pulled out a gun, held it loosely at his side. Not threatening, just present. "Lucien gave me 2 sets of instructions. If you came alone like he predicted, I give you this information and let you walk out to face the truth. If you brought backup, I was supposed to kill you and disappear. Which are you doing?" "Haven't decided yet." Victor tilted his head. "Tell me, did you know? When Morrison and Associates dropped that audit, did you ask why? Did you wonder what happened to the paralegal who'd been asking questions? Or did you just accept the win and move on?" Kale tried to remember. tried to pull up files and conversations from 8 years ago. But it was all a blur, just another deal that closed, another problem that disappeared, another day in the endless war to stay on top. "I don't know," he said finally. "I don't remember." "That's what I thought." Victor raised the gun. "And that's the problem, isn't it? You don't even remember the people you destroyed. They're just collateral damage, background noise, acceptable losses in the conquest of Ashcroft City. If you're going to shoot me, just do it." "I'm not going to shoot you." Victor lowered the gun. "That would be mercy. Lucien wants you alive, wants you to carry this weight for the rest of your life, wants you to understand that every person you hurt, every life you ruined, they all had brothers, sisters, mothers, people who loved them, people who remember." The gun clattered to the floor. Victor walked to the window. "The folder has everything, names of everyone Elena touched before she died. The investigation files, the break analysis, all of it." He looked back. "What you do with that information is up to you. But whatever you decide, know that Lucien won. Because even if you destroy him, even if you burn his entire operation to ash, you'll spend the rest of your life knowing he was right." Then Victor stepped through the window. Not jumped, stepped, like he was walking through a door. Kyle lunged forward, but it was already too late. By the time he reached the broken glass, Victor Chen was just a shape falling 9 stories to the concrete below. The impact echoed up the building like thunder. Kyle stood there breathing hard, staring down at the body, feeling reality fracture into pieces that didn't fit together anymore. Behind him, footsteps pounded up the stairs. Celine burst through the door, pepper spray raised, looking around wildly. "I heard—" She saw Kyle's face, saw the broken window, ran over and looked down. "Oh my God, did you—" "No." Kyle's voice sounded hollow. "He jumped. Why would he—" "Because he wanted me to have time to read this." Kyle grabbed the folder with shaking hands, opened it, and there it was, everything Victor had promised. Photos of Elena Drax, young, smiling, alive. Engagement photos with a man whose name was in the margins. Employment records from Morrison and Associates. The audit report she'd been working on, highlighting irregularities in 3 of Kyle's companies. And then the police report. Single vehicle accident. Brake failure. No signs of foul play. Case closed. Except underneath that, paper clipped together, were the real files. The ones that showed the brake line had been professionally cut. The witness who'd been paid off. The detective who'd stopped asking questions after a deposit showed up in his offshore account. And at the bottom, a memo on Kyle's own company letterhead. "Problem with Morrison audit resolved. Recommend we move forward with restructuring as planned." Signed with initials Kyle recognized. His own. From 8 years ago, when he'd signed hundreds of documents a week and never read most of them because that's what he paid people to do. Handle the details while he focused on the empire. Celine was reading over his shoulder. He heard her breath catch. "Kyle, don't." He closed the folder. "Just don't. You didn't know. Does that matter?" "Of course it matters." "Does it?" Kyle turned to face her. "A woman is dead. Her brother spent 8 years planning revenge. My mother almost died. You almost died. And it's all because I was too busy building an empire to notice who was dying underneath it. That's not— It's exactly fair." Kyle's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Marcus. "What?" "We've got a problem." Marcus sounded tense. "Lucien's talking. Says he wants to make a deal. Information for immunity." "What information?" "He says there are others. People higher up the chain who helped him. People you trust." Kale closed his eyes. "Bring him to the old house. I'll be there in 20 minutes. You sure that's— Just do it." He hung up. Started walking toward the stairs. Celine caught his arm. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." "That's not good enough." "It's all I've got." Kale pulled free. "You should go. This is about to get ugly." "I've seen ugly." "Not like this." She followed him anyway. The drive back to the old house happened in a silence so heavy it felt like drowning. Kale kept seeing Elena Drax's face in the photographs, kept seeing the memo with his initials, kept wondering how many other names were in files he'd never read, orders he'd never questioned, problems that had been resolved while he celebrated another victory. When they pulled up, 3 additional SUVs were already parked in the dirt driveway. Marcus stood on the porch with his arms crossed. Inside, voices echoed, angry, overlapping, chaos barely contained. "He's in the kitchen," Marcus said as Kyle approached, handcuffed to a chair. "Hasn't shut up since we brought him in." "What's he saying? That you're a murderer, that he's the victim, that everything he did was justified." Marcus paused. "And that he has proof you've been running a criminal empire that makes his operation look like a lemonade stand." Kale pushed past him into the house. The kitchen looked wrong with Lucien sitting in it, like finding a snake in a place meant for family dinners. He was still wearing the torn suit from last night, still had dried blood on his face, but his eyes were bright and focused and full of something that looked almost like triumph. "There he is," Lucien said, "the man who built an empire on corpses and called it success." Kale pulled out a chair, sat down across from him, didn't speak. "Victor told you, didn't he?" Lucien smiled. "I can see it in your face, the guilt, the realization, the understanding that everything you thought you knew was a lie. Elena Drax was your sister. She was my everything." Lucien's smile vanished. "And you killed her." "I didn't." "You signed the order," Lucien's voice cracked. "Maybe you don't remember. Maybe it was just another Tuesday for you. But that signature gave your people permission to solve the problem. And they solved it by cutting her brake lines and sending her off a bridge." Kale felt like he was drowning. "I never meant—" "Intent doesn't matter. Results matter. She's dead because you couldn't be bothered to read what you were signing, because you built a machine that kills people automatically, and you're too far removed to even notice the blood." Lucien leaned forward as far as the handcuffs would let him. "So I decided to make you notice, make you feel it, make you watch someone you love die slowly while you were powerless to stop it. By poisoning my mother. By giving you a taste of what I lived with for 8 years. Lucien's eyes were wet. Every day wondering if things would have been different. If I'd called her that morning. If I'd driven her to work. If I'd just been there. But you weren't." The words came out harsher than Kyle meant them. "And neither was I. We were both somewhere else, making choices that seemed right at the time, and now we're both sitting here covered in blood that won't wash off. Don't you dare compare us." "Why not? We're exactly the same." Kyle stood up. "You wanted revenge, so you built a conspiracy to destroy me. I wanted power, so I built an empire on fear. We both sacrificed people we should have protected. We both told ourselves it was justified. The only difference is, I'm still pretending I'm one of the good guys." The kitchen went silent. Evelyn appeared in the doorway. She'd been listening. Kale could see it in her face. "Kale," she started. "I need to know something," Kyle said to Lucien. "You said there were others, people higher up who helped you. Who are they?" Lucien smiled again, slow and cold. "Give me immunity and I'll tell you." "I'm not negotiating." "Then you'll never know." Lucien leaned back in the chair. "Could be your accountant. Could be your lawyer. Could be the detective who's been feeding you information for years. Could be everyone. Could be no one. The only way to find out is to give me what I want." Kale's hands curled into fists. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Because I spent 8 years inside your organization. 8 years learning every secret, every weakness, every skeleton in every closet. You think I did that alone? You think I built a conspiracy to poison your mother without help from people you trust?" "Tell me who." "Give me immunity." "I'll kill you right here." "Will you?" Lucien's smile widened. "Because that would make you exactly what I always said you were. A murderer. A monster. The kind of man who kills anyone who threatens his power." He leaned forward again. "So go ahead. Prove me right. Show your mother who you really are." Kyle's vision tunneled. He could feel rage and grief and guilt all crashing together into something that tasted like violence. His hand moved toward the gun Marcus had left on the counter. Celine grabbed his wrist. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't give him what he wants. He murdered. He tried to, just like you tried to 8 years ago, whether you knew it or not." Celine's grip tightened. "But you're not that person anymore, or you don't have to be. You don't understand. I understand that killing him won't bring Elena back, won't fix what you broke, won't make you clean." She pulled his hand away from the gun. But choosing not to kill him? That might be the first step toward actually earning the loyalty you've been buying all these years. Kale looked at Lucien, looked at his mother, looked at Celine standing there exhausted and terrified, but still refusing to let him become the monster everyone said he was. Then he heard the sound that made his blood freeze. Sirens. Lots of them, getting closer. Marcus burst into the kitchen. "We've got incoming, police, federal agents, half the alphabet agencies in the state. Someone called them." "Who?" Kyle demanded. Lucien started laughing. "I did. Had a dead man switch set up with my lawyer. If I didn't check in by dawn, he was supposed to send everything to the authorities. Every file, every piece of evidence, everything you've done for the past 20 years. You're insane." "I'm thorough." Lucien's laughter got louder. "You can kill me now if you want, but in about 3 minutes, this house is going to be surrounded. And then everyone's going to know exactly what you are." Evelyn stepped forward. "How much did you send them?" "Everything." Lucien looked at her. "Including the evidence that you knew, that you covered for him, that you're just as guilty as he is." "That's a lie." "Is it? Because I have financial records showing you moved money through offshore accounts, forged signatures on documents, made calls to protect your son when investigations got too close." Lucien's voice dropped to something almost gentle. "You're a good mother, Evelyn. You protected your child. But that doesn't make you innocent." The room started spinning. Kyle looked at his mother and saw confirmation in her eyes. Not all of it, probably not even most of it, but enough. Enough to know that she'd made choices too. Choices she'd justified because she loved him. Choices that had consequences. Just like his. Just like everyone's. The sirens were deafening now. Kyle could see red and blue lights flashing through the windows. Could hear vehicles screeching to stops. Could hear voices shouting commands through megaphones. "This is the police. Come out with your hands up." Marcus looked at Kyle. "What do we do?" Good question. Kyle had maybe 60 seconds before they breached the doors. 60 seconds to decide if he was going to fight or surrender. If he was going to run or stand. If he was going to be the monster they said he was or something different. Something better. Or maybe just something honest. He looked at Celine. "Get my mother out the back. There's a trail through the woods that leads to the main road. Marcus will go with you." "What about you?" Celine asked. "I'm staying." "Like hell you are." "I'm staying," Kyle repeated. "This is my empire, my mistakes, my consequences." He turned to Marcus. "Get them out. Make sure they're safe. Then disappear. New identities, new lives, whatever it takes. Boss D, that's an order." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. Started moving. Evelyn grabbed Kyle's arm. "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." He kissed her forehead, something he hadn't done since he was a child. "I love you, Mom. I'm sorry I forgot how to show it. Kyle." But Marcus was already pulling her toward the back door. Celine lingered for a moment longer, her eyes locked on Kyle's. "Don't die," she said. "Wasn't planning on it." "Liar." She turned and ran. The front door exploded inward. Federal agents poured through in tactical gear, weapons raised, shouting commands that all blurred together into white noise. Kale raised his hand slowly, carefully, kept his eyes on the lead agent. "Kale Veer?" "That's me." "You're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and about 40 other charges we'll explain downtown." The agent moved forward with handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent. I want to make a deal," Kyle interrupted. The agent paused. "Excuse me?" "I said I want to make a deal." Kale looked past him to where other agents were cuffing Lucien. "I'll give you everything. Names, accounts, evidence, every dirty secret in my empire, every person who helped build it, every crime we committed." "In exchange for what?" "Immunity for my mother and Celine Vale. They had nothing to do with this. They're victims." "That's not how this works." "That's exactly how this works." Kale's voice went cold, hard, the tone that had built an empire. "You want me? Fine. You got me. But they walk away clean or I don't say another word and you spend the next 5 years trying to build a case that my lawyers will tear apart in minutes." The agent studied him. "You're serious? Completely. And if we say no, then I take my chances at trial. Hire the best defense money can buy. Drag this out until everyone involved is dead from old age. Kale smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Your choice. One guilty man who confesses everything, or years of litigation that might not even stick. The agent looked at his partner. Something passed between them, a silent conversation that ended with a nod. We'll see what we can do, the agent said finally. Not good enough. It's the best you're getting right now. The handcuffs closed around Kael's wrists with a sound like finality. They pulled him toward the door and he didn't resist. Didn't fight. Just let them lead him out into the morning light where news helicopters already circled overhead and cameras flashed like lightning. As they put him in the back of the federal transport, Kael caught a glimpse of movement in the trees beyond the house. 3 figures running, Marcus in the lead, Evelyn struggling to keep up, and Celine looking back one last time before disappearing into the forest. Safe. The transport doors slammed shut. Kael sat in the darkness listening to the engine start and feeling the vehicle begin to move. He thought about Elena Drax dying in a car because he'd signed something without reading it. Thought about Lucien spending 8 years building revenge. Thought about his mother covering for him and Celine standing in front of a gun and all the people who'd been destroyed by the machine he'd built. And for the first time in 20 years, Kael Viri understood what he'd actually created. Not an empire. A graveyard, filled with people he'd never bothered to see until it was too late. The transport turned onto the main highway headed back to Ashcroft City, back to the towers and the power and the kingdom of fear he'd spent his whole life building. Except now he was going to tear it all down. Not because he wanted to. Not because he had a choice, but because it was the only way to stop being the monster he'd pretended not to be. And maybe, just maybe, if he burned it all down and gave them everything and let the truth destroy him completely. Maybe Celine would remember him as something other than the man who'd almost gotten her killed. Maybe his mother would forgive him for the son he'd become. Maybe he'd finally earned something he'd spent 20 years buying and never actually owned. Loyalty. Real loyalty. The kind that came from being worthy of it. The transport hit a pothole and Kael's shoulder screamed from the wound. He closed his eyes and let the pain wash over him like penance. Outside, the city grew closer. And inside, Kael Vire, the monster of Ashcroft City, the king of a graveyard, made a promise to himself. He was going to confess everything, name every name, destroy every person who'd helped build this empire of blood, even if it meant destroying himself in the process, especially if it meant that. Because somewhere in that warehouse last night, between watching his mother almost die and seeing Celine stand in front of a gun, Kael had finally understood the lesson it had taken 20 years to learn. Power bought with fear was just slavery with better marketing. Real power came from being the kind of person others chose to follow. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And if he had to burn his entire empire to ash to finally become that person, then he'd strike the match himself. The transport pulled into the federal building's underground garage. Agents opened the doors. Kael stepped out into fluorescent lighting and the smell of concrete and institutional coffee. They led him to an interrogation room, table, 2 chairs, one-way mirror, the works. Sat him down, left him alone. Kael waited. After what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, the door opened. 3 people entered. 2 federal agents he didn't recognize. And one he did. Detective Sarah Morrison, the daughter of the law firm owner who'd been auditing his companies 8 years ago. The woman whose associate had been Elena Drax. She looked at Kael with eyes that could have cut steel. "Hello, Mr. Vire," she said softly. "I've been waiting 8 years for this conversation." And Kael Vire, for the first time in his life, told the complete and absolute truth. "So have I." Detective Sarah Morrison sat down across from Kael with the kind of controlled fury that came from 8 years of waiting. She placed a file folder on the table between them, thick, worn at the edges, the kind of file that had been opened and closed 1,000 times while someone built a case one piece at a time. "My father's firm was Morrison and Associates," she said without preamble. "You remember them?" Kael's throat was dry. "Yes. They were auditing 3 of your shell companies, found irregularities. Elena Drax was the paralegal assigned to dig deeper." Sarah's fingers traced the edge of the folder. "She was 26, engaged, planning a wedding for the following spring. Had a brother who worked for you, though you didn't know that at the time." "I didn't know any of it." Convenient. Sarah opened the folder. Inside were photographs Kyle had already seen in Victor Chen's files. Elena smiling, Elena at her desk. Elena's car wrapped around a bridge support with emergency lights painting everything red and blue. She died on a Tuesday. Brake failure. The investigation went nowhere because the detective assigned to the case suddenly had enough money to buy a vacation house in the Bahamas. I never ordered— You didn't have to. Sarah's voice stayed level, but her eyes were volcanic. You built a system that eliminated threats automatically, signed papers without reading them, trusted people to handle details while you focused on expansion. And when those people decided the best way to protect your interests was to murder a paralegal, you never even asked the question. Cale forced himself to meet her gaze. You're right. That stopped her. She'd been building momentum for a speech, and he'd just derailed it with 2 words. What? You're right. About all of it. Kyle leaned back in the chair as far as the handcuffs would allow. I built an empire on fear and called it success. I signed documents without reading them because I trusted my people to handle problems. And when those problems disappeared, I celebrated the wins without asking about the cost. Sarah studied him like he was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. You're confessing. I'm telling the truth. There's a difference. Cale nodded toward the folder. Elena Drax died because I was too arrogant to pay attention to what I was authorizing. Her brother spent 8 years planning revenge. My mother almost died. People I care about almost died, and it's all my fault. People you care about? Sarah's lip curled. You mean the cafeteria worker who got dragged into this? Celine Vale? Yes. And your mother, Evelyn Vire? Yes. The same mother who helped you cover up crimes for 20 years? Sarah pulled out another set of documents. We have evidence she moved money through offshore accounts, forged signatures, made calls to derail investigations. She's not innocent, Mr. Vire. Neither are you. I know. Cale's voice cracked. But she was trying to protect her son. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it human. And Celine, she had nothing to do with any of this. She was just someone who refused to look away when my mother needed help. Why should I believe you? Because I'm about to give you everything. Cale leaned forward. Names, account numbers, evidence of every crime committed under my authority for the past 20 years, everyone who helped build this empire, everyone who profited from it, everyone who's still out there thinking they got away with it. Sarah's eyes narrowed. In exchange for what? Immunity for my mother and Celine Vale. Full protection. New identities if they need them. They walk away clean. And you? I don't walk away at all. Kyle held her gaze. I plead guilty to everything you can prove. Accept whatever sentence you think is appropriate. Spend the rest of my life in prison if that's what justice requires. I'm done running, done hiding, done pretending I'm anything other than what I am. The room went silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of phones ringing somewhere deeper in the building. One of the other agents, a man in his 50s with gray temples and tired eyes, cleared his throat. That's a hell of an offer. It's the only offer I'm making. Cale didn't look away from Sarah. You want to punish me? Fine. Lock me up. Throw away the key. But my mother and Celine, they're off limits. Your mother is complicit. My mother is dying. The words came out harsher than Cale intended. She's got maybe 2 years left, even with treatment. You really want to spend your time prosecuting a 71-year-old woman whose only crime was loving her son too much? Sarah's jaw worked. And the girl? Celine pulled a fire alarm to save someone's life. That's not a crime. That's heroism. If you go after her, I'll recant everything. Hire the best lawyers money can buy. Turn this into a circus that lasts a decade. You're threatening us? I'm negotiating. Cale leaned back. You get me. You get everyone who helped me. You get to dismantle an empire that's been operating in this city for 2 decades. All I'm asking is that you let 2 innocent people go. The second agent leaned over and whispered something to Sarah. She listened, face unreadable, then nodded. We'll need everything, she said finally. And I mean everything. Bank accounts, shell companies, names of every dirty cop and judge and politician in your pocket, every murder, every extortion, every piece of evidence that leads to a conviction. You'll have it, and you'll testify. Grand jury, trial, whatever we need. Yes. No recanting, no legal games, no suddenly forgetting details. I'll tell you everything I know. Cale's hands were shaking, which is probably more than you want to hear. Sarah stood up. We'll draw up the agreement. You'll be held in federal custody until we can verify the information you're providing. If any of it turns out to be false, it won't be. If any of it is false, Sarah continued, the deal is void and everyone goes down, your mother included. Understood. She walked to the door, then stopped, looked back. Why now? Why confess after spending 20 years building this empire? Cale thought about Celine standing in front of a gun, thought about his mother lying in that glass room fighting poison someone had put in her body on his behalf, thought about Elena Drax dying on a Tuesday because he'd signed something without reading it. Because I finally ran out of excuses, he said quietly, and people I care about were paying for my mistakes. Sarah's expression didn't soften, but something flickered in her eyes. Maybe understanding, maybe just exhaustion. She left. The other two agents followed, the door locked with a sound like finality. Cale sat alone in the interrogation room and felt the full weight of what he'd just done settle across his shoulders. He'd confessed to everything, agreed to destroy his entire organization, committed to spending the rest of his life in prison. And somehow, it was the first decision in 20 years that actually felt right. They moved him to a holding cell while the lawyers drew up the immunity agreement. It was a small room, 8 by 10, concrete walls, metal bench, toilet in the corner. The door had a slot for food and a window too small to fit through even if he could break the reinforced glass. Cale sat on the bench and waited. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time moved differently when you were locked in a box measuring your life in heartbeats. Finally, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. The slot opened, a guard's voice. You've got a visitor. The door unlocked. Marcus stepped inside. Cale stood up so fast he almost fell over. How did you... Federal agents aren't the only ones with connections. Marcus's face was grim. We need to talk. My mother is safe. Celine too. Got them out of the state. New identities are being processed. Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice. But we've got a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where Lucian Drax didn't give the feds everything. He held back insurance. Marcus pulled out a phone. Not his own, probably a burner. Showed Cale a photo. These were delivered to my secure location an hour ago. The photo showed Celine walking into a coffee shop. Timestamp from this morning. She was supposed to be in federal protection, supposed to be invisible. Someone had found her anyway. Cale's blood went ice cold. Who took this? Lucien's people. The ones he didn't tell you about. The ones still operating. Marcus swiped to the next photo. Celine at a gas station. Then another. Celine and Evelyn getting into a car with Marcus in the driver's seat. They're watching, waiting, and they sent a message with the photos. Marcus showed him the text. You took everything from Lucian. Now we take everything from you, starting with the girl. You have 24 hours to withdraw your confession and sign over the empire. Or she dies. Then your mother. Then everyone you've ever cared about. Cale read it 3 times. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone. How many people? He asked. At least 6. Maybe more. Lucian built a secondary network. People he didn't tell the feds about because he knew they'd be his insurance if everything went sideways. Marcus pocketed the phone. They're serious, boss. They've already proven they can get to your people. Where's Celine now? Safe house, 3 states away. But if they found her once, they'll find her again. Cale started pacing. The cell was too small. He felt like the walls were closing in. Can you move her? Already did, but we're running out of places to hide. These people are professionals. They've got resources. And they're motivated by the same thing that drove Lucien. They want you to suffer. Then let me. Cale stopped pacing. Tell them they can have me. Let them do whatever they want. Just leave Celine and my mother alone. That's not how this works. They don't want you dead. They want you broken. Watching everyone you care about die while you're powerless to stop it. Marcus's voice dropped, just like Lucien wanted. So what do I do? You have 2 choices. Marcus counted on his fingers. 1, you recant your confession. Sign over the empire like they want. Hope they keep their word and let your people live. And two? Two, you let me handle it. The way Marcus said it made Cale's stomach turn. Handle it how? The way we used to handle problems. Before you got a conscience. Marcus met his eyes. I find them. All of them. And I make sure they can't threaten anyone ever again. You mean kill them? I mean eliminate the threat permanently. Cale felt like he was drowning. This was exactly what he'd been trying to escape. The cycle of violence. The solution through fear. The machine that killed people automatically while he pretended his hands were clean. No, he said. Boss, I said no. Cale's voice was firm. I'm done with that. Done with killing people to solve problems. There has to be another way. There isn't. Marcus's frustration was boiling over. You think the feds can protect them? These people have been ghosting investigations for years. They're invisible, untouchable. The only language they understand is force. Then we speak a different language. What language? Surrender? Confession? Marcus laughed bitterly. You're sitting in a cell because you decided to tell the truth. How's that working out? Your people are in danger. Your empire's being carved up by vultures. And you're locked in here talking about doing the right thing while everyone you care about bleeds. The words hit like punches. Because Marcus was right. Cale had confessed thinking it would end the violence. Thinking justice and truth would be enough. But the machine he'd built didn't stop just because he decided to shut it down. It kept grinding, kept killing, kept destroying everyone in its path. There has to be another way, Cale said again. But this time it sounded like a prayer to no one. Marcus pulled out a key. I can get you out, right now. We walk out the service entrance, get you to a safe location, and we handle this the old way. Fast, permanent, final. That's insane. We'd never make it out of the building. You'd be surprised what $250,000 in cash can buy. Marcus held up the key. I've got 3 guards on payroll, a car waiting 2 blocks away, new passports. Within 6 hours, you could be on a plane to somewhere without extradition. And then what? I spend the rest of my life running? You spend the rest of your life alive. With your mother alive. With Celine alive. Marcus's voice got urgent. This is the only play, boss. The only way everyone survives. Cale looked at the key. Thought about walking out. Thought about going back to being the monster everyone said he was. Solving problems with violence, buying loyalty with fear, sacrificing his humanity to keep the people he loved safe. It would work. He knew it would work. That's what made it so terrifying. What about the immunity deal? He asked. Void the second you disappear. Your mother and Celine lose protection. But we move them before that happens. Get them somewhere safe, somewhere Lucian's people can't reach. And Sarah Morrison? The federal case? Falls apart without your testimony. They might arrest some people, but the empire survives. Just under new management. Marcus stepped closer. Yours. The cell felt smaller than ever. Cale could feel the walls pressing in, could feel the weight of impossible choices crushing down on him, could feel everything he'd been trying to build collapse into the same old pattern. Violence. Fear. Survival at any cost. I need to think, he said. You've got about 30 seconds before I have to leave. After that, the offer expires. Marcus checked his watch. What's it going to be? Prison and hope the feds protect people they don't care about? Or freedom and the chance to actually save the ones you love? Cale opened his mouth. The door burst open. Federal agents poured in, 6 of them, weapons drawn, surrounding Marcus before he could react. One of them twisted the key out of his hand while another slammed him against the wall and cuffed him. Sarah Morrison stepped into the cell. Interesting conversation, she said coldly. We've been listening. Marcus went rigid. You bugged the cell. Standard procedure for organized crime cases. Sarah looked at Cale. Did you know about this? No. Convenient. It's the truth. Cale's heart was hammering. I didn't know he was coming. Didn't know about the escape plan. But you were considering it. Sarah's eyes were hard. I heard you asking questions, thinking it through. You were about to say yes. I was thinking about breaking a deal you made an hour ago. Sarah turned to the agents. Take him back to interrogation and get Morrison, Marcus Morrison, processed. Add conspiracy to facilitate escape to whatever else we find in his background. They dragged Marcus toward the door. He looked back at Cale with eyes full of something that might have been betrayal or might have been understanding. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said. "Probably." Cale's voice was hollow. "But it's mine to make." They pulled Marcus out. The door slammed shut. Sarah stayed. "Do you understand what just happened?" she asked. "You saved me from doing something stupid. I saved you from invalidating our agreement." Sarah moved closer. "You were about to walk out of here with a known criminal, flee the country, become a fugitive. Everything you just confessed to would have been worthless." "I know." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing, you're still the same person who built an empire on corpses. You just got better at pretending to feel guilty about it." The accusation stung because part of it was true. Cale had been considering Marcus's offer, had been weighing the cost of escape against the cost of staying, had been calculating whether saving Celine and his mother was worth sacrificing his chance at redemption. And he still didn't know the answer. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we verify every piece of information you gave us. Check every account. Interview every name you provided. And if it all checks out..." Sarah paused. "We grant immunity to your mother and Celine Vale. And the threats? Lucien's people? We'll handle it." "How?" "Federal protection. Witness relocation if necessary. We've done this before." "Not against people like this." Cale stood up. "These aren't random criminals. They're professionals. They've been operating in shadows for years. They don't make mistakes." "Neither do we." "You made one 8 years ago." The words came out before Cale could stop them. "When Elena Drax died. When the investigation went nowhere. When the detective took payoff money and nobody noticed." Sarah's face went pale. "That's different. Is it? You think the same system that failed then is suddenly going to protect Celine now? Protect my mother?" Cale moved closer to the bars. "I'm giving you everything. My empire. My freedom. My life. All I'm asking is that you actually protect the two people who matter." "We will." "Promise me." Cale's voice cracked. "Not as a detective. Not as an agent. As the daughter of a man whose firm got destroyed by people like me, promise me you'll keep them safe." Sarah stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I promise." "Thank you." She turned to leave. "Detective?" Sarah stopped. "Marcus was right about one thing," Cale said quietly. "These people won't stop until I'm broken, until everyone I care about is dead. They don't want money or power. They want revenge. Then we'll give them justice instead. And if justice isn't enough," Sarah looked back at him, "then we'll give them whatever it takes to end this." She left. The door locked. Cale sat down on the metal bench and put his head in his hands. His shoulder was throbbing from the old wound. His entire body ached from exhaustion and stress. And somewhere 3 states away, Celine was sitting in a safe house that might not be safe at all, wondering if trusting him had been the biggest mistake of her life. Probably was. Everything Cale touched turned to ash. Everyone who trusted him ended up bleeding. And now he'd made a bet with the federal government that they could protect people better than he could, despite all the evidence that systems failed, bureaucracy killed, and promises meant nothing when professionals came hunting. The slot in the door opened. A guard's voice. "Food!" A tray slid through, some kind of sandwich, coffee that looked like it had been made yesterday. An apple bruised on one side. Cale ignored it, closed his eyes, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. 12 hours later, they moved him to a conference room for the formal debriefing. Sarah was there with a stenographer, 2 other federal agents, and a prosecutor who looked like she'd been dreaming of this moment for years. "Let's start from the beginning," Sarah said. "Morrison and Associates, the audit. What do you remember?" Cale told them everything. It took 6 hours. He gave them names, accountants who'd cooked books, lawyers who'd buried evidence, judges who'd taken bribes. He gave them account numbers, offshore holdings in the Caymans, shell companies in Delaware, real estate purchased through proxies. He gave them dates, when deals were made, when threats were issued, when people disappeared and nobody asked questions. He told them about the detective who'd closed Elena Drax's investigation, about the medical examiner who'd ruled the death accidental despite evidence of tampering. About the 3 different occasions where witnesses had recanted testimony after receiving anonymous cash deposits. He confessed to things he'd forgotten he'd done, signed papers that authorized violence he'd never witnessed, built an empire on a foundation of fear so effective that people policed themselves without him ever having to give direct orders. And with every name, every date, every detail, Kyle felt the weight on his chest get lighter. Not forgiven, not absolved, just honest. Finally, when he finished, the prosecutor sat back and let out a long breath. This is enough to bring down half the power structure in Ashcroft City. Good, Kyle said. You understand what you're doing? Sarah asked. Some of these people are connected, powerful. They'll come after you. They already are. I mean in prison. You think Lucian's people are dangerous? Wait until you're locked up with the sons and brothers of men you're about to destroy. Sarah leaned forward. You're signing your own death warrant. Maybe, Kyle met her eyes, but at least it'll be my choice. The room went quiet. Then the prosecutor stood up. We'll need 48 hours to verify this information. Start making arrests. In the meantime, you'll be held in protective custody. And my mother, Celine? They're being moved to a secure location as we speak. Full federal protection, new identities are being prepared. Sarah pulled out her phone, showed him a photo. Evelyn and Celine in what looked like a hotel room somewhere generic and safe. They're scared, but they're alive. Cale stared at the photo. Celine looked exhausted. His mother looked frail, but they were together, protected, safe, for now. When can I talk to them? He asked. You can't. Contact would compromise their security. Sarah pocketed the phone. They know you confessed. They know why. And they... She paused. Your mother wanted me to tell you she's proud of you. Kael's throat tightened. And Celine? Said you're still a liar, but at least you're trying. That almost made him smile. Almost. They took him back to the holding cell. This time they added extra security. 2 guards outside, cameras inside, regular check-ins every 30 minutes. Kael lay down on the metal bench and tried to sleep. Couldn't. His mind kept racing through scenarios. What if the feds couldn't protect them? What if Lucien's people got through anyway? What if this entire confession was just another mistake in a lifetime of mistakes? Around 3 a.m., the lights went out. Complete darkness. Kael sat up fast. Hello? No answer. Then he heard it. Footsteps in the corridor. Multiple people. Moving fast but quiet. The cell door unlocked. Kael pressed himself against the wall, heart hammering. The door opened. A figure stepped inside. Too dark to see clearly, but big, armed, moving with professional efficiency. Don't move, a voice said. Don't scream. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Kael's mouth went dry. Who are you? Someone who's been waiting for this moment since you signed that confession. The figure moved closer. You thought you could destroy everything Lucian built? Thought you could confess and walk away clean? You're more naive than I thought. The guards, are being paid very well to take a long coffee break. Another figure appeared in the doorway. Then another. 3 total. All armed, all focused on him. We're walking out of here, quietly, calmly. And then you're going to make a phone call. To who? To Detective Morrison. You're going to recant your confession. Say you were coerced, traumatized, not thinking clearly. The first figure grabbed Kael's arm, hard. And then you're going to sign documents transferring your empire to the people who actually deserve it. And if I refuse? The figure pulled out a phone, showed Kael a video. Celine, tied to a chair. Blood running from a cut above her eye. Someone off camera holding a gun to her head. If you refuse, the figure said quietly, we start sending you pieces of her. Starting with fingers, then ears. Then we move on to your mother and work our way through everyone you've ever cared about. Kael's vision tunneled. You're lying. She's in federal protection. Federal protection is 3 agents in a hotel room. We got through them in under 2 minutes. The video showed the timestamp. 40 minutes ago. So here's how this works. You come with us. You make the call. You sign the papers. And maybe we let them live. I'll kill you. The figure hit him. Fast. Professional. Kael's head snapped back and he tasted blood. You'll do exactly what we tell you. Because the alternative is watching everyone you love die on camera while you sit in a cell and do nothing. The figure hauled him to his feet. Move! They pulled him toward the door. Kael's mind was racing. 3 of them, armed, professional, moving him through a federal building like they owned it, which meant they had more than just guards on payroll. They had access, credentials, a plan that had probably been in place since the moment he'd confessed. This was always going to happen. He'd just been too stupid to see it coming. They moved through corridors Kael didn't recognize. Service areas, maintenance tunnels, places the public never saw. Every few feet they'd stop, check corners, communicate with hand signals that suggested military training. "Where are you taking me?" Kael asked. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can have a long conversation about loyalty and consequences." The leader, Kael was starting to think of him that way, pulled him around a corner. "You built an empire on fear, Mr. Vire. Time to learn what fear actually feels like." They reached a door marked emergency exit. One of the men scanned a key card. The lock clicked open. Cold air rushed in from outside. They were about to push him through when gunfire erupted behind them. The third man went down instantly. Headshot, clean, professional. The second spun around returning fire and caught 2 bullets center mass, dropped like his strings had been cut. The leader grabbed Kael and used him as a shield, gun pressed against his temple. "Show yourself!" the leader shouted. Marcus stepped out of the shadows, bleeding from the shoulder, favoring his left leg, holding a gun that looked like he'd taken it off one of the dead men. "Let him go," Marcus said. "Not a chance. I wasn't asking." Marcus's gun didn't waver. "I've got a shot. Clean through his eye socket. Drops you before you can pull that trigger." "You'd risk hitting your boss?" "I've made worse bets." Marcus took a step closer. "Last chance. Drop the weapon and walk away. Or I drop you and explain to the feds that you were attempting to kidnap a federal witness." The leader's grip tightened on Kael. "You think you've won? You think saving him here changes anything? We've got the girl. We've got his mother. We've got—" Marcus shot him. Clean, professional, the kind of shot that came from years of practice. The leader dropped. Kael stumbled forward, ears ringing, tasting cordite and fear. Marcus caught him. "You okay? How did you escape? Please, I've been planning contingencies since before you hired me." Marcus pulled him toward the exit. "We need to move. More of them coming." The video, Celine, was fake. Old footage from when they were tracking her. She's safe. Your mother too. Feds moved them 2 hours ago to a location these idiots don't know about. Marcus pushed him through the door. "But they'll figure it out eventually, which means we're out of time." Outside, a car waited, engine running. Driver Kael didn't recognize. "Get in," Marcus said. "I can't. The confession, the deal, is worthless if you're dead." Marcus practically threw him into the back seat. "We'll figure out the legal stuff later. Right now, we're getting you somewhere those people can't reach." The car accelerated before Kael could argue. He looked back and saw federal agents pouring out of the building, saw lights, sirens, chaos, saw his chance at redemption disappearing in the rearview mirror. "Where are we going?" he asked. Marcus met his eyes in the mirror. "War," he said simply. "We're going to war." And Kael Vier, sitting in the back of a car fleeing federal custody with bodies behind him and blood on his hands again, realized that some machines didn't stop just because you wanted them to. They kept grinding, kept killing, kept pulling you back into the darkness no matter how hard you tried to reach the light. The city lights blurred past the windows, and somewhere ahead, the final battle waited. The one where everything burned, and nobody walked away clean. The car tore through the empty streets of Ashcroft City at speeds that made the buildings blur into streaks of light and shadow. Kael sat in the back seat with his hands still cuffed, tasting blood from where the leader had hit him, feeling his heart hammer against his ribs like it was trying to escape his chest. Marcus was on the phone speaking in clipped sentences. "Yeah, we're clear. Moving to location 3. ETA 12 minutes. Pause. I don't care what the feds say. We handle this our way now." "Marcus," Kael started. "Not now, boss. You just killed federal custody. You know what that means? Means we're both fugitives." Marcus hung up and turned in his seat to look at Kael. His shoulder was still bleeding from earlier, but he moved like it didn't matter. Those men were going to kill you, execute you in a federal building and make it look like suicide or escape attempt gone wrong. You understand that? I understand you just threw away any chance I had at redemption. Redemption? Marcus laughed, sharp and bitter. You think confessing to crimes makes you redeemed? You think sitting in a cell while everyone you care about gets hunted makes you a good person? He shook his head. You were always too soft for this life. That's why you needed people like me. People like you are why I'm in this mess. The words landed hard. Marcus's jaw tightened. Yeah, people like me. The ones who did your dirty work while you pretended your hands were clean. The ones who eliminated threats and solved problems so you could sleep at night thinking you were different from the monsters. I never asked you to kill anyone. You didn't have to. That's how the machine worked. Marcus turned back around. But you want to know the truth? I'm tired too. Tired of being the sword while you get to be the king. Tired of making choices that keep you alive while I collect bodies. The driver, silent until now, spoke up. We're being followed. 2 vehicles. Black SUVs. Marcus checked the side mirror. Bed's or Lucien's people? Can't tell yet. Assume both. Take the river route. The car swerved down a side street that led toward the industrial waterfront. The same area where Kyle had confronted Lucien what felt like a lifetime ago. Abandoned warehouses and rusted shipping containers and the smell of oil on water. The perfect place for things to end badly. They pulled into a warehouse compound surrounded by chain-link fence. The gate was already open. Someone had been here first, preparing. The car stopped inside a massive loading bay that echoed with their arrival. Marcus got out first, gun raised, scanning. Clear. Cale climbed out, looked around. The warehouse was mostly empty except for old machinery and shadows that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. What is this place? He asked. Safe house. One of 6 I set up over the years for emergencies. Marcus moved to a workbench and grabbed a key, unlocked Kael's handcuffs. We've got maybe 30 minutes before someone finds us. Need to make choices. What choices? Whether we run or fight. Marcus set the gun on the workbench between them. We can disappear, right now. I've got passports, cash, extraction routes. Within 6 hours, you're on a boat to international waters. Gone. Invisible. And Celine? My mother? Feds will keep them safe as long as you're not around to be targeted. Marcus met his eyes. That's the play, boss. You disappear. Become a ghost. Let the feds dismantle what's left of the empire. Your people live. You live. Everyone walks away. Cale looked at the gun sitting between them. Except I spend the rest of my life running. Yeah, but you spend it breathing. That's not living. It's survival, which is better than the alternative. Marcus leaned against the workbench. Or we fight. We find everyone who came after you tonight. Everyone who's still loyal to Lucien's vision. And we end this the old way, permanent, brutal, final. How many people are we talking about? At least 15, maybe 20, spread across the city, connected, protected. The kind of fight that gets everyone killed. Cale walked to the edge of the loading bay and looked out at the city beyond the fence. Ashcroft City. His kingdom. His prison. The place where he'd built an empire on other people's fear and called it success. 20 years of climbing, 3 days of falling. And now he stood at the bottom, looking up at ruins, wondering if any of it had ever been worth it. Behind him, car doors slammed. Marcus tensed. We've got company. But the voice that called out wasn't hostile. Kyle Vire? It was Sarah Morrison. She stepped into the warehouse with 6 federal agents flanking her, all armed but weapons lowered. She looked at Kyle, then at Marcus, then at the gun on the workbench. You running or planning something stupid? She asked. Haven't decided yet, Kyle said. Well, decide fast. Because right now you're a fugitive who escaped federal custody with the help of a known criminal. Sarah walked closer. I should arrest you both. But you're not. Not yet. She stopped at 10 feet away. Those men who tried to take you, we identified them. Former military, hired through a proxy company that traces back to Lucien's secondary network, the one he didn't tell us about. I know. Do you also know that 3 of his people hit the safe house where your mother and Celine were being held? Sarah's voice was tight. We got them out with maybe 2 minutes to spare. Federal protection almost failed, just like you said it would. Cale felt his stomach drop. Are they? They're alive, scared, angry. but alive. Sarah pulled out her phone, showed him a video call. Celine's face appeared on screen, exhausted, bruised, furious. "You're an idiot," she said without preamble. "I know. You confessed to everything thinking it would protect us. Now we're running from people who want to use us to hurt you. Great plan." "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't stop bullets." Celine's voice cracked. "But your mother wants to talk to you." The camera shifted. Evelyn appeared, frailer than Kale remembered, wrapped in a blanket that looked too big for her, but her eyes were clear and sharp. "Are you safe?" she asked. "Not really." "Good, because I didn't raise a coward." Evelyn coughed, wet and painful. "You started this by trying to do the right thing. Don't ruin it by running away now." "Mom, these people are scared, just like Lucien was scared, just like everyone who ever hurt us was scared." Evelyn leaned closer to the camera. "Fear makes people dangerous, but it also makes them desperate. And desperate people make mistakes." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying finish what you started, not with violence, not with fear, with truth." Her eyes softened. "Show them what you showed Detective Morrison. Show them that the machine can actually be broken." The call ended. Kael stood there holding Sarah's phone, feeling the weight of his mother's words settle into his bones. Sarah took the phone back. "She's right, about the machine being breakable. But it requires you to actually break it, not just confess and hope someone else does the work." "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to testify. Not just in a deposition, publicly, grand jury, open court. Every camera in the city watching while you name names and burn down everything you built." Sarah's voice was hard. "I want you to make it impossible for anyone to pretend this didn't happen. Impossible for the corruption to hide. Impossible for the machine to keep grinding. They'll kill me." "Probably, but you'll die meaning something instead of running scared." Sarah gestured to Marcus. "And you. You can either help him do this right, or you can keep solving problems the old way and watch everything collapse anyway." Marcus didn't answer immediately. He looked at Kale, then at the gun on the workbench, then back at Sarah. "If we do this, if he testifies, you guarantee protection?" Marcus asked. "For him? No. He's too high profile, too many enemies. Best I can do is make sure he lives long enough to finish testifying." Sarah turned to Kael. "But for your mother and Celine, them I can protect. Witness relocation, new identities, real security. They disappear and no one finds them." "Ever?" "Ever." Kale felt something crack inside his chest. "I'd never see them again." "No. But they'd be alive, safe, free from all of this." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Sometimes the cost of redemption is giving up the people we're trying to redeem ourselves for." The warehouse went silent except for the distant sound of the river and the city breathing beyond the walls. Kale thought about Celine standing in front of a gun because someone had to. Thought about his mother fighting poison while he'd been too blind to see what was happening. Thought about Elena Drax dying on a Tuesday because he'd signed something without reading it. Thought about 20 years of building an empire on fear and calling it strength. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll testify. All of it. Every name, every crime, everything." Marcus exhaled slowly. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." "Then I'm with you." Marcus picked up the gun, checked the magazine. "But we do this smart. We don't just walk into a courtroom and hope for the best. We prepare. We plan. We make sure that when you stand up there, the words actually matter." Sarah nodded. "Agreed. We've got 72 hours before the grand jury convenes. That's 72 hours to keep you alive and build an airtight case." "And Lucien?" Kael asked. "He's already talking, making deals, trying to reduce his sentence by giving us more names." Sarah's lip curled. "But his testimony is tainted. Comes from someone trying to save himself. Yours is different. You're not asking for anything except that the people you care about stay safe. When do we start?" "Now, Ted." They moved Kael to a secure location, not a jail cell this time, but a hotel room in the financial district with federal agents outside and surveillance equipment inside. For 3 days he lived in that room going over testimony, reviewing evidence, preparing for the moment when he'd stand in front of cameras and judges and the entire city and confess to everything. Marcus stayed close, not as a bodyguard anymore, but as something harder to define, a witness to the wreckage, a reminder of what the Empire had actually cost. On the second night, Marcus broke the silence they'd been maintaining. "You remember why you hired me?" he asked. Kyle looked up from the files he'd been reviewing. "You were efficient. I was ruthless. There's a difference." Marcus sat down across from him. "You needed someone who could do the things you couldn't stomach. Make the hard calls. Eliminate the threats. I was good at it because I didn't feel guilty. And now? Now I feel everything." Marcus's voice was rough. "Every person I heard on your behalf, every problem I solved with violence, every choice I made thinking it was protecting something worth protecting." He looked at Kyle. "We built a machine that destroyed people, and I was the engine. So was I." "No. You were the architect. I was the one who made the blueprints real." Marcus stood up. "When you testify, when you name names, mine needs to be on that list." Kyle went very still. "Marcus, I'm serious. You can't burn down the Empire and pretend I wasn't part of the Foundation. I did things—" His voice broke. "I did things that can't be justified, can't be explained away, can't be forgiven. You were following orders. I was making choices. Same as you. Same as everyone." Marcus walked to the window. "Difference is, I knew what I was doing, every time. And I did it anyway because it was easier than admitting I'd become a monster." The room fell quiet. Kyle thought about all the times Marcus had solved problems he'd never asked about. All the threats that had disappeared. All the obstacles that had been removed so cleanly he'd never even known they existed. "If I name you," Kyle said slowly, "you go to prison." "Yeah. For the rest of your life, probably." "Yeah. And you're okay with that?" Marcus turned from the window. "I'm tired, boss. Tired of running. Tired of pretending. Tired of being the thing in the dark that makes other people's nightmares real." He smiled, sad and broken. "Maybe prison is where I belong. Maybe it's the only place left where I can actually be honest about what I am." Kyle stood up, crossed the room, put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You saved my life, multiple times. And I ended others, more times than I can count. You were loyal when everyone else was lining up to betray me. Loyalty to a monster is still monstrous." Marcus met his eyes. "Put me on the list. Tell them what I did. Let me face what I've earned. Only if you're sure." "I'm sure." They stood there for a moment, two men who'd built an empire on blood and fear, finally understanding what it had actually cost. Then Marcus stepped back. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be ugly." He left. Kale sat alone in the hotel room and added Marcus's name to the list of people he was going to destroy with his testimony. It was the longest list he'd ever written, and every name on it felt like carving pieces out of his own flesh. The grand jury convened on a Wednesday morning in a courthouse that looked like a temple to justice. Marble floors, high ceilings, the weight of law and consequence pressing down on everything. Kyle walked in wearing a suit that Sarah's people had provided, plain, unremarkable, the kind of thing that said he wasn't trying to impress anyone. The handcuffs felt heavier than they had before, or maybe that was just the weight of what he was about to do. The courtroom was packed, media in the gallery, federal prosecutors at their table, and in the witness box, a chair where Kyle would sit and dismantle everything he'd spent 20 years building. Sarah met him outside the courtroom. "You ready?" "No." "Good. Because if you were ready for this, it would mean you didn't understand what you're doing." She lowered her voice. "Last chance to back out. We can still cut a private deal, closed testimony, sealed records. You'd still go to prison, but you wouldn't have to do it publicly. My mother said to finish what I started. Your mother isn't the one walking into that room. No, but she's the one who taught me that courage means doing the right thing even when you're terrified." Kyle looked at the courtroom doors. "Let's go." They walked in. The jury sat in their box looking at Kyle like he was something they'd found under a microscope. The judge, A woman in her 60s with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen every lie ever told gestured to the witness stand. "Mr. Vire, please be seated." Cale sat. The prosecutor stood. "State your name for the record." "Cale Vire." "And you are here voluntarily to provide testimony regarding criminal activities conducted under your authority over the past 20 years?" "Yes." "Before we begin, you understand that anything you say here can and will be used against you in criminal proceedings?" "I understand." "And you're waiving your right to counsel and choosing to testify without immunity or protection from prosecution?" "I am." The prosecutor paused. "Why?" The question hung in the air. Cale looked at the jury, looked at the cameras, looked at Sarah Morrison sitting in the gallery with an expression that might have been respect or might have been pity. "Because," he said quietly, "I spent 20 years building an empire on other people's fear, and the only way to actually destroy it is to stop being afraid myself." The prosecutor nodded. "Then let's begin." For the next 6 hours, Cale testified. He told them about Morrison and Associates, about Elena Drax and the brake lines cut by people working under his authority, about the detective who'd taken money to close the investigation and the medical examiner who'd ruled it an accident despite evidence to the contrary. He told them about shell companies and offshore accounts and real estate purchased through proxies, about judges bought with campaign contributions and politicians controlled through blackmail, and bureaucrats who'd learned to look the other way when Cale's interests were threatened. He told them about Lucien Drax, not as a villain, but as a brother driven to revenge by grief that Cale himself had caused, about the conspiracy to poison Evelyn Vire, about Ravenmere House and the doctors and nurses who'd taken money to participate in attempted murder. He told them about Marcus Morrison, loyal, ruthless, efficient Marcus, who'd solved problems with violence and never asked for forgiveness because he knew he didn't deserve it. He told them everything. Names spilled out like water from a broken dam. Dates, account numbers, locations, evidence, every secret he'd kept, every crime he'd authorized, every person he'd hurt in the endless pursuit of power that never actually made him feel powerful. And with every word, Cale felt the empire crumbling, not loudly, not dramatically, just dissolving, like it had always been made of smoke and lies and fear, and the truth was wind that scattered it into nothing. When he finished, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. The prosecutor stood. "Do you have anything else to add?" Cale thought about it. Thought about Celine and his mother hiding somewhere safe under new names, living new lives he'd never be part of. Thought about Marcus sitting in a cell waiting for his own trial. Thought about Elena Drax, who'd never gotten to have her spring wedding. "Just this," he said. "I'm guilty. Of everything. Every charge you bring, every accusation you make. I'm guilty." His voice stayed steady. "And I'm ready to face whatever punishment you think is appropriate. Because the people I hurt, they deserved better than what I gave them. They deserve justice. And if this is how justice finally arrives, then I accept it." The judge looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Vire, in all my years on the bench, I've never seen someone voluntarily destroy themselves this thoroughly. You understand that this testimony will result in charges that will keep you imprisoned for the rest of your natural life?" "I understand." "And you're still choosing to provide it?" "I am." The judge nodded slowly. "Then this court thanks you for your honesty, however painful it may be." She banged the gavel. The testimony was over. Federal agents moved in immediately, surrounding Cale, preparing to transport him back to custody. As they led him toward the door, he caught Sarah's eye one last time. She nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. And right now, that was all Cale could ask for. Months. The trial lasted 6 months. During that time, Cale sat in a cell and watched his empire collapse on the news. Arrests every week, assets seized, shell companies dissolved. His name became synonymous with corruption. A cautionary tale about what happened when someone built power on fear instead of earning it through respect. Marcus went on trial separately, pled guilty to 43 counts of conspiracy, murder, and racketeering. Got sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. They put him in the same facility as Cale, different wings, different schedules, But occasionally they'd see each other in the yard or the cafeteria, two men who'd built a kingdom together and watched it burn. They never spoke, didn't need to. The silence between them said everything that mattered. Lucien got a deal, testified against people higher up the chain in exchange for 25 years instead of life. Kael heard he'd been moved to a minimum security facility somewhere in the Midwest. Part of him hoped Lucien found peace. The rest of him knew that peace wasn't something people like them ever actually earned. On the day of Kael's sentencing, the courtroom was packed again. Media, victims' families, people whose lives he'd destroyed coming to watch justice finally arrive. The judge read the charges. 47 counts. Everything from racketeering to conspiracy to commit murder to corruption of public officials. Kael Weyer, she said, I've reviewed your testimony, considered your cooperation, acknowledged that you've provided more assistance to law enforcement than any defendant I've ever encountered. She paused. But I've also reviewed the evidence of what you did, the people you hurt, the lives you destroyed, the empire you built on suffering. Kael stood, didn't defend himself, didn't ask for mercy, just listened. Therefore, the judge continued, I'm sentencing you to 5 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. You will spend the remainder of your life in federal custody. You will never be free again. She banged the gavel. It was over. As they led Kael out of the courtroom, he saw a face in the gallery that made his heart stop. Celine. She wasn't supposed to be there, wasn't supposed to risk her new identity by coming back to the city. But there she was, older looking somehow, worn down by months of hiding, but alive. Their eyes met for maybe 3 seconds. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Then she was gone. And Kael understood that those 2 words were all he was ever going to get. No redemption, no forgiveness, no happy ending where the monster became a hero. Just acknowledgement that he'd tried, that he'd stopped lying, that he'd finally chosen truth over power. And somehow, in the strangest way possible, that was enough. Years passed. The empire Kael had built became a case study in law schools, a warning, a lesson about what happened when someone confused fear with loyalty and power with respect. Ashcroft City moved on. New buildings rose. New people took power. The machine kept grinding because machines never actually stopped. They just found new operators. But some things changed. Ravenmere House got shut down and rebuilt under federal oversight. The doctors and nurses who'd participated in the conspiracy to poison Evelyn Weyer went to prison. The facility became a place where people actually received care instead of quiet murder. Morrison and Associates reopened under Sarah's management. She used her position to audit companies with the same thoroughness that had gotten Elena Drax killed. Except now she had federal backing and nobody dared interfere. And somewhere, in a place Kael would never know about, Evelyn Weyer lived out her remaining years in peace. She died quietly one autumn morning, not from poison or violence or the cruelty of men, but from simple age. Natural causes, the way it was supposed to be. Kael didn't find out until 3 weeks later when a letter arrived at the prison, written in shaky handwriting on paper that smelled faintly of lavender. Dear Kael, it read, by the time you receive this, I'll be gone. I don't have regrets about how I lived, only about the choices I made that hurt people I should have protected. You're my son. I love you. I'm proud of you, not for what you built, but for what you destroyed. That took courage I didn't think you had. Thank you for proving me wrong. Your mother. Kael sat in his cell reading the letter over and over until the words blurred. Then he folded it carefully and put it under his pillow where he could keep it close. It was the only thing he owned that mattered. The only proof that despite everything, despite the empire and the violence and the years of being a monster, someone had loved him anyway. Not because of what he'd done, but because of who he'd tried to become when it finally mattered. 10 years after his sentencing, Kael got a visitor. He'd stopped accepting visitors years ago, stopped wanting to see the outside world or be reminded of everything he'd lost. But this one was persistent, kept requesting, kept coming back. Finally, Kael agreed. They brought him to the visitor room, plexiglass barrier, phones on both sides, guards watching from the corners. And there, sitting on the other side of the glass, was Celine. She'd aged, lines around her eyes, gray starting to show in her dark hair. But she still had those same exhausted, too knowing eyes that had seen through his bullshit from the very beginning. Cale picked up the phone. Celine picked up hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You're not supposed to be here," Cale said finally. "Your new identity is fine. I'm careful." Celine's voice was older too, rougher. I needed to see you." "Why?" "Because I spent 10 years trying to forget you existed, and I couldn't." She looked at him through the glass. "You destroyed your entire empire to keep me and your mother safe. You confessed to everything, gave up your freedom, your life, everything." Pause. "And I never got to say thank you properly." "You said it at the trial. I mouthed it." "There's a difference." Celine leaned closer. "I'm saying it now, thank you. For choosing truth over power. For being willing to burn everything down rather than let the machine keep destroying people. For finally being the person your mother always believed you could be." Kyle felt his throat tighten. "I'm not that person. I'm just someone who ran out of lies. Sometimes that's the same thing." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Celine said, "I got married 3 years ago. His name is Daniel. He's a teacher. Good man, patient, kind. Everything you weren't. Congratulations. We have a daughter. Her name is Evelyn, after your mother." Celine pulled out her phone, showed him a photo through the glass. A little girl with dark hair and her mother's eyes, smiling at the camera. "She's 4. Smart, stubborn, asks questions about everything." Cale stared at the photo. "She's beautiful." "She is. And she's growing up in a world that's slightly less terrible because you decided to tell the truth." Celine put the phone away. "I tell her stories sometimes. About people who make mistakes. About courage, meaning you do the right thing even when you're terrified. About how monsters can choose to stop being monsters." "Do you tell her about me?" "No. But I tell her about the lesson you taught me." Celine's eyes were wet now. "That the difference between power and strength is whether people follow you because they have to or because they want to. And that real loyalty, the kind that actually matters, can't be bought. It has to be earned." Cale couldn't speak. Celine stood up. "I have to go. Daniel's waiting in the car. We're driving back tonight." "Celine!" "Don't." She pressed her hand against the glass. "Don't apologize. Don't explain. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep being honest. Keep showing people that change is possible even when it costs everything." She smiled, sad and broken and real. "That matters more than you know." She hung up the phone, walked away. Cale watched her go until the guards told him visiting hours were over. Then they took him back to his cell. He lay down on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about a little girl named Evelyn who would grow up never knowing that a monster had once chosen truth over survival because her mother had shown him what courage actually looked like. And somehow, despite everything, that felt like enough. Not redemption, not forgiveness, not escape from consequences, just meaning. The kind that came from finally being honest about what you were and what you'd done and accepting that some debts could never be repaid, only acknowledged. Outside his cell, the prison went about its business. Guards walked rounds. Inmates shouted to each other. The machine kept grinding because that's what machines did. But inside, Kyle Vire, the monster of Ashcroft City, the king who'd ruled through fear, finally understood something his mother had tried to teach him 20 years ago. Power built on fear was just slavery with better marketing. Real power came from being worthy of loyalty. And the only way to actually earn that was to stop lying about who you were, even when the truth destroyed you. Especially then. Because some lessons could only be learned at the bottom of the fall, when the empire had crumbled, when the lies had been stripped away, when all that remained was the raw, ugly truth of what you'd been and what you'd done. And the choice, the only choice that mattered, was whether to keep lying or finally start telling the truth. Kyle had made his choice. He'd burn for it, was burning for it, would spend the rest of his life in a cell paying for crimes that could never be balanced by confession or cooperation or any amount of time served. But at least he'd finally stopped pretending. At least he'd finally chosen truth. And in a world built on lies, that was its own kind of victory. Small, painful, honest, real. The lights went out. The prison went quiet. And Cale Vere for the first time in 20 years, slept without nightmares. Because monsters who admitted what they were didn't need to hide anymore. They just needed to face what they'd earned, and accept that some prices were worth paying, even when they cost everything.